Every movement we make, whether it is a deliberate step forward, a small turn of the head, or the almost invisible shifting of fingers as we rest, begins deep within the brain. This fact is easy to forget because movement feels so immediate and natural. When you decide to raise your hand, it seems as though your hand obeys instantly, as if there were no process between thought and action. Yet beneath this effortless appearance lies a vast and intricate network, a living symphony in which billions of neurons take part. The human brain, along with its branching connections into the spinal cord and the nerves that spread outward to the muscles, orchestrates every gesture in a way that is both precise and remarkably quiet. The mind does not consciously narrate each step of this process. Instead, most of it flows beneath awareness, giving you the freedom to move without needing to think about every detail. In its essence, movement is the final expression of brain activity. The brain perceives, it plans, it imagines, but ultimately, it must also act. Action is the bridge between inner thought and the outer world. To reach out and touch something, to shift the body in space, or to simply keep posture upright, the brain sends signals through delicate electrical impulses. These signals pass from one cell to another, leaping across microscopic gaps with the aid of chemical messengers. They travel downward through the spinal cord, branching into nerves that stretch toward the farthest corners of the body, until they arrive at a muscle fiber, waiting for instruction. The muscle responds by contracting, a simple act that, when multiplied across countless fibers, produces the visible motion of an arm, a leg, or even a subtle facial expression. This process may be thought of as a quiet symphony because, like a symphony, it requires both coordination and timing. If one section of an orchestra plays too quickly while another lags behind, the music becomes jarring. In much the same way, if one part of the brain signals too strongly while another fails to adjust, the movement appears awkward, jerky, or unsteady. The harmony of movement depends on multiple regions working together: the motor cortex to begin the plan, the basal ganglia to smooth and regulate the rhythm, the cerebellum to fine-tune balance and precision, and the spinal pathways to deliver the instructions swiftly to their destinations. Each region plays its own part, and only by their cooperation does the body achieve the graceful unity of motion. Imagine, for instance, something as ordinary as reaching for a glass of water. The thought begins with intention, a quiet recognition that thirst can be relieved. The motor cortex, located in the frontal lobe, prepares the plan: which arm to lift, how far to extend it, at what angle the fingers must close around the glass. Even as this plan forms, the basal ganglia provide guidance, drawing upon past experiences to help the movement remain smooth and efficient rather than hesitant or rigid. The cerebellum, the little brain at the back of the skull, contributes by adjusting posture and predicting the weight of the glass, ensuring that balance is preserved as the arm extends. Meanwhile, sensory information from the eyes, muscles, and inner ear flows back to the brain, offering constant feedback so that any small error can be corrected before it grows large. Within less than a second, the arm rises, the hand opens, the glass is grasped, and the sip is taken. All of this happens without conscious awareness of the countless steps required. The nervous system is remarkable in its ability to operate on both voluntary and involuntary levels. Some movements are deliberate, chosen, and willed into existence, like pressing a key on a piano or stepping across a threshold. Others are reflexive, arising automatically without thought, like blinking when a particle nears the eye or pulling away from something hot. The brain governs both, though in different ways. Reflexes travel through shorter loops, often beginning and ending in the spinal cord, while conscious movement relies on higher regions of the brain. The duality allows the body to respond quickly to danger, while still granting the flexibility of choice in daily action. This orchestration of movement is not only about motion itself, but also about stillness. To stand upright, to sit balanced, or to hold a pen without trembling, the brain must constantly adjust tiny muscle fibers across the body. Even apparent rest requires activity. Postural muscles remain slightly contracted, guided by signals from the spinal cord and brainstem. The cerebellum checks alignment and makes corrections that are so subtle they escape notice. Without this constant quiet work, the body would slump, sway, or fall. Movement, then, is not only the obvious gestures, but also the stability that allows those gestures to be meaningful. Another gentle layer in this story is memory. The brain does not begin from nothing each time you move. Instead, it relies on learned patterns, stored through practice and repetition. Walking, for example, is so thoroughly learned that it proceeds with little conscious input, even though it involves the careful coordination of dozens of muscles. Riding a bicycle, once mastered, can be recalled years later, because the basal ganglia and cerebellum preserve the pattern of movements. These stored memories of action, sometimes called motor programs, give life a rhythm of familiarity. They allow you to focus on higher thoughts, while the body carries out its duties almost automatically. Yet movement is not perfect. The system can be disrupted by injury, disease, or even fatigue. When certain regions of the brain lose their harmony, the symphony falters. In conditions such as Parkinson's disease, the loss of dopamine in the basal ganglia makes movements slower and more rigid, as though the rhythm of the orchestra has been dulled. In disorders of the cerebellum, movements may become shaky or imprecise, as if the fine-tuning of the instruments were lost. Even simple tiredness can reveal the fragility of this system, when normally smooth actions turn clumsy. These examples remind us that the quiet grace of everyday movement depends on delicate balance, one that the brain must maintain constantly. The study of how the brain controls movement is not only a scientific pursuit, but also a reflection on the hidden beauty of life. Beneath the surface of every action is a story of coordination and communication, of electrical pulses flashing along microscopic pathways, of muscles responding faithfully to signals from far away. To learn about this system is to appreciate the unseen effort that supports even the smallest gesture. It is to realize that lifting a hand, turning the eyes, or taking a step are not trivial, but the outcome of one of the most complex control systems known in the natural world. As you listen quietly, it is possible to imagine the body at rest, yet still alive with activity. The brain continues to hum softly, maintaining posture, regulating breathing, adjusting the fine muscles of the eyes. The orchestra never fully stops. It only shifts tempo, from the lively rhythms of walking and working to the gentle background melodies of sleep and stillness. In the chapters ahead, we will walk slowly through each part of this hidden orchestra. We will explore how the motor cortex begins the plan, how the basal ganglia refine the rhythm, how the cerebellum adds grace and precision, and how the spinal pathways carry the instructions faithfully to the muscles. Along the way, we will see what happens when the harmony is disturbed, and how the brain, with its capacity for adaptation, sometimes finds new ways to restore balance. For now, let the thought settle gently that every movement, no matter how small, is the outcome of an intricate and beautiful process. The brain is not simply an organ of thought, but also the silent conductor of the body's endless dance. From the moment of birth until the final breath, it guides the body in motion, keeping the rhythm steady, the posture balanced, and the gestures graceful. To notice this, even briefly, is to glimpse the quiet symphony of life itself. 2. The nervous system as a communication network. The human nervous system may be imagined as a vast, living network of pathways, stretching from the delicate folds of the brain outward through the spinal cord and into every corner of the body. Its central purpose is communication, and its messages are carried with a speed and precision that makes the difference between stillness and movement, between safety and danger, between awareness and unconsciousness. To understand how the brain controls movement, it is necessary to see the nervous system not as a collection of isolated parts, but as a continuous web of signals binding together brain, spinal cord, muscles, and sensory organs in an unbroken loop of information. This network functions tirelessly, awake and asleep, adjusting with each breath and each heartbeat, carrying out countless exchanges that remain invisible to our awareness. At the heart of this system is the central nervous system, often shortened to CNS, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. These two structures may be thought of as the command centers, the hubs where information is gathered, processed. The brain, with its billions of neurons and endless branching connections, analyzes the world through sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. It forms intentions, plans, actions, and considers consequences. The spinal cord, running like a protected cable down the back, serves both as a messenger and as a processor of simpler responses. Encased in bone and bathed in protective fluid, these two central structures are shielded with extraordinary care, for they are the control towers of human life. Extending outward from the central nervous system is the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, which includes all the nerves that branch from the spinal cord and cranial nerves that emerge directly from the brain. This part of the system reaches into the limbs, the organs, and the tissues, linking the brain's commands with the muscles that execute them. The peripheral system also works in reverse, carrying sensory information back from the skin, the joints, the muscles, and the environment, so that the brain remains constantly informed. This bidirectional communication allows movement to be adapted and corrected in real time. Without it, actions would quickly collapse into clumsiness, for the body would not know whether a step was too long, whether balance was lost, or whether the hand closed around the object it was reaching for. One way to picture this system is as a network of roads. The brain is the capital city, the spinal cord is the main highway, and the peripheral nerves are the countless smaller roads and pathways leading outward. Messages, like travelers, move continuously along these routes, some heading outward with commands, others returning with reports. The smoothness of movement depends on the uninterrupted flow of this traffic. If a road is blocked, damaged, or interrupted, signals cannot pass, and the muscles at the end of that pathway may weaken or fall silent. This is why injuries to the spinal cord or peripheral nerves can have such profound effects on motion, cutting off communication between brain and muscle. Within this grand network, signals are carried by specialized cells called neurons. Each neuron is a tiny living messenger, capable of generating an electrical impulse that runs along its length. These impulses, known as action potentials, travel rapidly, sometimes covering great distances in the body. At the end of the neuron, the signal passes to another cell across a microscopic gap called a synapse. Here, chemical messengers called neurotransmitters are released, bridging the gap and carrying the message onward. Through trillions of such connections, signals ripple across the nervous system in patterns of astonishing complexity. Some pathways involve only 2 or 3 neurons, as in the case of a reflex. Others may involve hundreds of interconnected cells, as when the brain plans and carries out a voluntary movement. The nervous system is also organized into 2 functional branches: the somatic system and the autonomic system. The somatic system manages voluntary control, guiding skeletal muscles that allow us to walk, grasp, speak, and express ourselves. The autonomic system, by contrast, governs the involuntary functions that keep us alive: heartbeat, digestion, breathing, glandular secretion. These two divisions are deeply interconnected, often sharing pathways and influencing one another. When you decide to run, your somatic system controls the rhythmic contractions of your legs, while your autonomic system increases your heart rate and widens your blood vessels to supply muscles with more oxygen. The conscious and the unconscious thus move hand in hand, both directed by the nervous system's quiet coordination. An especially fascinating aspect of this communication is its speed. Electrical impulses in neurons can travel at rates exceeding 100 meters per second. This rapidity is what makes reflexes so swift and movements so fluid. Imagine touching something sharp. Within a fraction of a second, sensory neurons in the skin send a message up through the spinal cord. The spinal cord, without waiting for the brain, immediately routes the signal back down, motor neurons to pull the hand away. Only afterward does the sensation of pain arrive in the brain, letting you consciously understand what happened. This design ensures survival, prioritizing action over reflection in moments of danger. Even in more deliberate movement, the efficiency of communication is essential. Consider playing a piano. Each finger must strike keys in rapid succession, sometimes at speeds faster than conscious thought could direct. The nervous system achieves this through well-practiced pathways and constant feedback from muscles and joints. Sensory nerves report on the position of the fingers, while motor commands adjust the timing and force of each stroke. The result is a smooth flow of motion that seems almost automatic, yet is underpinned by countless signals passing through the nervous system's channels. The communication of the nervous system is not a one-way street. It is a continuous loop, where signals travel outward to muscles and return with feedback to the brain. This feedback includes proprioception, the sense of body position, which allows you to know the placement of your limbs even with eyes closed. It also includes balance signals from the inner ear, pressure signals from the skin, and tension signals from the muscles themselves. The brain integrates all this information, adjusting movements so quickly that corrections occur before you even notice the error. A foot placed slightly off balance is corrected in an instant. A grasp that is too weak is tightened before the object slips. This constant dialogue keeps the body in harmony with its surroundings. It is also worth considering how the nervous system changes over time. In early childhood, pathways are formed and strengthened with use, a process known as neuroplasticity. A baby learning to walk is building new networks of communication between brain, spinal cord, and muscles. With practice, these pathways become stronger and movements more stable. In adulthood, practice still refines and reinforces these pathways, allowing for skill learning, whether it is playing an instrument, learning a new sport, or mastering a delicate task with the hands. Even in injury, the nervous system shows remarkable adaptability, sometimes finding alternate pathways when the usual ones are damaged. This ability to rewire is what allows recovery, though it may be slow and incomplete. The nervous system, then, may be described as a living communication network, one that is both robust and delicate. Robust because it can carry out countless exchanges every moment without pause, sustaining life with unbroken regularity. Delicate because small disruptions, a severed nerve, a blocked pathway, a chemical imbalance, can have profound effects on motion and sensation. To appreciate this system is to recognize the hidden dialogue that continues every second within the body, a conversation between brain and muscle, between intention and action, between stillness and motion. As we continue our journey into the study of movement, this vision of the nervous system as a communication network provides the essential foundation. It reminds us that movement is not simply a matter of muscles contracting, but of messages flowing continuously and without end. Every step, every gesture, every quiet shift of posture is an expression of this network's work. It is the brain speaking through its language of impulses, the spinal cord carrying the messages faithfully, the peripheral nerves delivering them with precision, and the muscles responding in harmony. This is the quiet conversation of the body, and it continues unceasingly, even as we rest, even as we sleep, a gentle dialogue of life itself. 3. The motor cortex, command center of voluntary motion. The motor cortex lies within the broad expanse of the brain's frontal lobe, quietly directing the voluntary actions that define so much of human life. Every deliberate step, every reach of the hand, every subtle articulation of the lips when speaking, begins in this remarkable stretch of tissue, though it may not look extraordinary to the eye, being only a small region among the folded ridges of the cerebrum. Its importance cannot be overstated. The motor cortex is the conductor of voluntary movement, transforming thought into action and intention into motion. Without it, the connection between will and the physical body would be broken, leaving gestures unformed and plans unrealized. This region of the brain is not a single undivided mass, but rather a collection of closely related areas working in concert. The primary motor cortex, located along a ridge known as the precentral gyrus, is the most direct link between thought and muscle action. Here, individual neurons send signals down through the spinal cord to control specific muscle groups. Just in front of it lies the premotor cortex, which helps plan and prepare movements before they begin, shaping the sequence of actions so they occur smoothly. Further still is the supplementary motor area, a region that comes into play when movements involve both sides of the body or when actions are rehearsed mentally before being carried out. Together, these interconnected regions form the motor cortex, a layered system of control that ensures motion is precise, fluid, and adapted to the demands of each moment. A striking feature of the motor cortex is its organization. The body is represented across its surface in a map-like arrangement, often called the motor homunculus. In this representation, parts of the body are laid out not according to their physical size, but according to the degree of fine control they require. The hands, lips, and tongue occupy large portions of the cortex because their movements demand precision. By contrast, the back or legs, though physically larger, occupy smaller regions because their actions are broader and less intricate. This mapping reflects the brain's priorities. Speech, dexterity, and the delicate use of the hands are central to human life, and so command a larger share of neural real estate. When seen in drawings, the motor homunculus appears as a distorted figure with enormous hands and lips, a reminder of how unevenly the brain distributes its attention across the body. When the motor cortex prepares to act, it does not work in isolation. Signals from the sensory cortex, located just behind it, provide constant information about the body's position and contact with the environment. Visual and auditory regions contribute cues about the external world. The premotor areas integrate this information, selecting appropriate actions and sequencing them into a coherent plan. Only then does the primary motor cortex issue the final command, sending signals down through descending tracks into the spinal cord. The act of movement, though it feels immediate, is thus preceded by a delicate preparation in which the brain anticipates and organizes each detail before the muscles contract. The commands leaving the motor cortex travel along pathways known as corticospinal tracts. These fibers cross through the brainstem and continue down into the spinal cord, where they connect with motor neurons that reach the muscles. Many of these fibers cross over to the opposite side of the body, which is why the left hemisphere of the brain controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left. This arrangement, called contralateral control, is a fundamental feature of human anatomy. The result is that damage to one hemisphere of the brain often leads to weakness or paralysis on the opposite side of the body, a fact that has been observed for centuries in cases of stroke or injury. The motor cortex is also involved in learning. At first, when a new skill is attempted, such as playing a simple sequence on a piano or practicing a dance step, activity in the motor cortex is broad and widespread. Many neurons participate, as though the brain is trying different routes to achieve the correct outcome. With practice, however, the activity becomes more focused and efficient. The motor cortex refines its signals, strengthening certain connections and quieting others, until the movement becomes smoother and more automatic. This process is part of the brain's plasticity, its ability to reorganize and adapt in response to experience. Through repetition, the motor cortex builds a memory of action, allowing movements to be recalled with less conscious effort in the future. One of the most intriguing aspects of the motor cortex is its ability to generate not only actual movements but also imagined ones. When a person vividly pictures themselves performing an action such as lifting a cup or writing a word, the motor cortex becomes active even though the muscles remain still. This overlap explains why mental rehearsal can improve physical performance, a technique often used by athletes and musicians. The brain rehearses the pathways of motion, strengthening them in anticipation, so that when the real movement occurs, it is executed more smoothly. The line between thought and action in the motor cortex is thus thin, with imagination and reality sharing much of the same neural foundation. Injury or disease affecting the motor cortex reveals its central role with stark clarity. A stroke in this region may result in weakness, paralysis, or loss of fine control, depending on which part of the homunculus is involved. Damage near the region representing the hand may make it difficult to grasp objects, while damage in the area for the face may impair speech. Yet even in these cases, the brain sometimes shows a remarkable capacity for recovery. Neighboring areas of the cortex can adapt, taking over some of the lost functions, particularly when therapy encourages the use of the affected muscles. This adaptability demonstrates again the plasticity of the nervous system, a quiet resilience that allows movement to return, even if imperfectly, after injury. The motor cortex also interacts constantly with deeper brain structures, particularly the basal ganglia and cerebellum. These connections form loops of feedback, ensuring that movements are not only initiated, but also regulated and refined. The motor cortex sends signals downward, while the basal ganglia help determine which actions should proceed and which should be inhibited. The cerebellum, in turn, compares intended actions with actual performance and sends corrections back up. This cycle of communication creates a flow of information that is as much about adjustment as it is about command. Without it, movements would be clumsy and ill-timed, like music played without listening to the rhythm. It is worth pausing to reflect on how seamlessly the motor cortex integrates into daily life. Every word spoken involves the careful coordination of dozens of muscles in the lips, tongue, and throat, all controlled by signals from this region. Every gesture of the hand, whether tying a shoelace or brushing hair aside, depends on its commands. Even the simple act of standing still, balancing the body against gravity, requires the motor cortex to send out a constant stream of instructions, adjusting the tone of postural muscles from moment to moment. Movement is not an occasional event, but a continuous dialogue between the brain and the body, with the motor cortex serving as the ever-present voice of intention. As we drift further into the story of how the brain controls movement, the motor cortex emerges as the place where desire becomes reality. It is here that the thought to reach, to step, or to speak is transformed into an actual signal, carried outward to the muscles that make the thought visible in the world. Though supported by many other regions, the motor cortex remains the central figure in this process, the final gate through which voluntary action must pass. To imagine life without its contribution is to imagine a body unable to obey its own will, a silent orchestra with no conductor. With it, every movement, from the smallest twitch of a finger to the most elaborate dance, becomes possible, a reflection of the mind expressed in the language of motion. 4. The homunculus map, how the cortex represents the body. When scientists first began to explore the motor cortex in detail, they discovered something extraordinary, something that forever changed the way we understand the link between brain and body. They found that the surface of the motor cortex is not organized randomly, but instead follows a curious map, one that mirrors the body itself. This discovery revealed that different parts of the brain are dedicated to different parts of the body, each controlling specific groups of muscles. Yet the proportions of this map are far from ordinary. The representation does not match the actual size of the body, but instead reflects the level of fine control required. The result is a distorted figure, often illustrated as a strange, almost comical creature, known as the motor homunculus. Though unusual in appearance, this figure provides a deep insight into the priorities of the brain, showing us which movements it values most and how it distributes its attention. The term homunculus, meaning little man, comes from Latin, and in this case, it refers to a miniature human whose body parts are arranged across the surface of the cortex. Each region of the motor cortex corresponds to a region of the body, creating a continuous though distorted map. The toes and feet are represented near the top, moving downward through the legs, trunk, arms, hands, face, and finally the tongue and throat at the lower end of the cortical strip. If one were to walk across the surface of the motor cortex from top to bottom, it would be as though walking down a human body, starting from the feet and ending at the mouth. This discovery was first made through careful experiments in which electrical stimulation of different parts of the cortex produced movement in specific muscles. Over time, the consistency of these responses confirmed the existence of this orderly representation. The striking feature of the homunculus is not simply that the body is mapped, but that the map is distorted. Large regions of the motor cortex are devoted to the hands, lips, and tongue, while much smaller regions control areas such as the back or thighs. The hands, though small in physical size, take up a disproportionately large portion of cortical space because they require a remarkable degree of precision and dexterity. Similarly, the muscles of the face, particularly those involved in speech and expression, are finely tuned and thus claim a vast share of neural territory. The back, by contrast, though expansive, performs broader movements with less need for delicate adjustment and so occupies less cortical real estate. This uneven distribution reveals that the brain's true measure of importance is not size but complexity of control. When illustrated, the motor homunculus appears as a figure with enormous hands, exaggerated lips, and a swollen tongue, while the trunk and legs shrink to comparatively tiny proportions. The image, though strange, is not meant as a literal representation, but as a metaphor for the brain's priorities. It reminds us that the ability to manipulate objects with our fingers, to speak and articulate sounds, and to express emotion through facial movement are among the most valued capacities of human life. These functions required the brain to allocate vast neural resources, shaping the homunculus into its unique form. The existence of the motor map also provides an explanation for why damage to certain areas of the brain produces very specific deficits. A stroke affecting the upper region of the motor cortex may impair movement of the legs, while damage lower down may affect the face and speech. This specificity allows neurologists to infer the location of a lesion based on the pattern of symptoms, essentially reading the body's losses as reflections of the brain's internal geography. In rehabilitation, this knowledge becomes a guide, showing which regions need to be re-engaged or retrained to restore function. The motor homunculus also interacts closely with its counterpart in the sensory cortex, which lies just behind it in the parietal lobe. This sensory map mirrors the motor one, representing the body according to sensitivity rather than control. Here too, the hands, lips, and tongue dominate, reflecting the importance of touch and feedback in guiding action. The two maps are aligned so that areas responsible for movement are positioned next to areas responsible for sensation, allowing communication between them. This arrangement ensures that when the hand moves, the brain immediately receives sensory information about its position and contact, closing the loop between action and perception. An intriguing feature of the motor homunculus is its plasticity. The map is not fixed permanently but can shift and adapt in response to changes in use. If a person loses a limb, the region of the cortex once dedicated to that limb does not remain silent. Instead, neighboring regions may expand into the unused area, reflecting the brain's ability to reorganize itself. Similarly, when a person practices a skill intensively, such as playing a musical instrument, the cortical representation of the hands may enlarge, allowing for more precise control. This adaptability underscores the dynamic nature of the homunculus, showing that the brain's map of the body is shaped not only by anatomy but also by experience. One can imagine the homunculus as a living figure, shifting subtly as the body learns new skills or faces new challenges. In childhood, as fine motor abilities develop, the representation of the hands and fingers becomes more refined. In adulthood, with practice and repetition, areas dedicated to skilled tasks may grow stronger. In injury, the figure changes again, with neighboring regions taking on new responsibilities. This constant adjustment ensures that the body's abilities remain as fluid as possible, even in the face of change. The distorted figure of the homunculus also invites reflection on what makes us distinctly human. Other animals possess motor maps as well, but the size of particular regions varies according to their needs. In primates, as in humans, the hands and face occupy large regions, reflecting their reliance on grasping and communication. In other species, different priorities emerge. A songbird may devote vast cortical space to the control of its vocal apparatus, while an animal that relies heavily on running may give more territory to the legs. In humans, the dominance of the hands and face reflects the central role of tool use and language, capacities that have shaped our evolution and defined our place in the world. The motor homunculus, then, is more than a scientific curiosity. It is a window into the values of the brain, a picture of what it holds most important. It shows us that the brain is not simply a mirror of physical size, but a reflection of function and necessity. By magnifying the hands and mouth, it tells us that the ability to manipulate objects and to communicate are central to our survival and our identity. The smallness of the back and trunk reminds us that broad, simple motions require less attention, while fine, intricate actions command the brain's greatest focus. As we drift deeper into the study of movement, the homunculus provides a gentle reminder of the brain's careful economy. Every square millimeter of cortex is precious, and so it is allocated not according to fairness or symmetry, but according to demand. The result is a distorted little figure that, strange though it may look, carries within it the story of what the brain finds most meaningful. To contemplate this figure is to glimpse the hidden logic of movement, to see how the brain distributes its energy, and to recognize the quiet truth that not all motions are equal in its eyes. And so, the motor homunculus stands as a map both literal and symbolic. Literal, in the sense that it accurately charts which part of the cortex controls which part of the body. Symbolic in the sense that it reflects the brain's emphasis on certain skills and abilities. It is the little man within us, stretched and warped to mirror our priorities, reminding us that the brain's world is not one of symmetry, but of function. In this quiet representation lies the story of human movement, shaped by need, by use, and by the endless conversation between brain and body. 5. The basal ganglia, rhythm and precision in action. Deep within the folds of the brain, beneath the outer layers of the cortex, lie structures that quietly shape the rhythm and smoothness of every movement we make. These structures are collectively known as the basal ganglia, and though they are not as outwardly visible as the motor cortex or the cerebellum, their influence is profound. They function as regulators, ensuring that motion flows evenly, that unneeded movements are silenced, and that practiced actions unfold with grace. If the motor cortex provides the initial spark of intention, the basal ganglia act as guardians of refinement, turning bursts of thought into movements that feel steady and natural. Without them, action would be hesitant, disjointed, or overwhelming in its excess, like music without rhythm or speech without pacing. The basal ganglia are not a single structure, but a group of interconnected nuclei buried deep within the brain's hemispheres. Among these are the caudate nucleus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, the subthalamic nucleus, and the substantia nigra. Each plays a slightly different role, but together they form a network that communicates constantly with the motor cortex, the thalamus, and the brainstem. Information flows in loops, moving from the cortex down into the basal ganglia, where it is processed and refined, and then back upward to influence motor commands. These loops function like internal feedback circuits, quietly checking whether an action should proceed, whether it needs smoothing, or whether it should be inhibited altogether. One of the basal ganglia's central roles is the selection of movement. At any given moment, the brain contemplates multiple possible actions. You may consider stepping forward, turning your head, or raising your arm, yet only one action can proceed at a time. The basal ganglia help suppress competing impulses, allowing the chosen movement to rise above the rest. This ability to filter and select is what gives actions their clarity. Instead of the body attempting to perform multiple conflicting gestures at once, the basal ganglia ensure that motion unfolds in a focused and orderly way. This selection process is subtle and rapid, so fast that it remains invisible to conscious thought. But without it, movement would dissolve into chaos. Another essential role of the basal ganglia is in maintaining rhythm and consistency. Movements that are repetitive or patterned, such as walking, chewing, or writing, rely on these structures to sustain their flow. The basal ganglia provide a steady background beat, a kind of metronome for the body's actions. In this way, they work hand in hand with the motor cortex and the cerebellum, ensuring that steps are even, that speech maintains cadence, and that gestures follow a natural pace. When this system falters, movements often become halting or irregular, as though the rhythm of the orchestra has been lost. The substantia nigra, one of the nuclei of the basal ganglia, plays a particularly important role in this system. It produces dopamine, a neurotransmitter that modulates activity within the loops of the basal ganglia. Dopamine acts as a fine-tuning chemical, influencing how strongly certain pathways are activated or inhibited. When dopamine levels are balanced, movements proceed smoothly. But when dopamine is reduced, as in Parkinson's disease, the system becomes sluggish and actions slow or freeze. This dependence on dopamine illustrates how delicately the basal ganglia are tuned, relying not only on structural connections but also on precise chemical balance to function correctly. Beyond rhythm and selection, the basal ganglia are also deeply involved in the learning of habits and skills. When a new action is practiced repeatedly, such as playing a musical passage or tying a knot, the basal ganglia help transform it from a conscious effort into an automatic routine. Over time, what once required attention and focus becomes effortless, executed almost without thought. This is why habits, both beneficial and detrimental, can become so deeply ingrained. The basal ganglia are the brain's repository for well-learned patterns, storing them so they can be recalled and performed efficiently. In this way, they relieve the motor cortex of constant planning, allowing higher areas of the brain to focus on new challenges, while familiar actions flow with ease. The importance of the basal ganglia becomes most clear when their function is disrupted. In Parkinson's disease, where dopamine-producing cells in the substantia nigra degenerate, the ability to initiate and sustain movement is impaired. Patients may find it difficult to start walking, Their steps may become shorter and shuffling, and their movements may lack the fluid rhythm they once had. In Huntington's disease, by contrast, damage to other regions of the basal ganglia leads to uncontrolled, excessive movements, where inhibition fails and the body performs motions that were never intended. These conditions, though different in expression, both reveal the basal ganglia's central role to regulate the balance between movement and stillness, excitation and inhibition, rhythm and restraint. Interestingly, the basal ganglia are not limited to motor control alone. Evidence suggests they also play a role in aspects of cognition, motivation, and emotion. The same circuits that select and refine movements appear to be involved in the selection of thoughts and decisions, helping to filter competing impulses in the mind as well as in the body. This overlap may explain why disorders of the basal ganglia sometimes affect mood and behavior in addition to movement. It also highlights the deep integration of motor and cognitive processes, showing that the regulation of action and the regulation of thought are not so different as they may seem. One can imagine the basal ganglia as a quiet gatekeeper, standing between intention and execution. Each time the motor cortex signals a possible action, the basal ganglia weigh the signal, deciding whether to let it through, whether to suppress it, or whether to adjust its strength. The result is a system of checks and balances, ensuring that movement remains purposeful rather than random, controlled rather than chaotic. This gatekeeping does not occur with delay or hesitation, but with astonishing speed, so that actions feel seamless even as countless small decisions are made within milliseconds. Reflecting on the basal ganglia also brings a sense of appreciation for the unconscious aspects of movement. So much of what we do flows without conscious guidance because these deep structures handle the details. To walk across a room does not require thought about each step, nor does speaking require deliberate planning of every muscle contraction. These actions are carried by circuits that have been trained and refined, releasing the conscious mind to focus on other things. The basal ganglia, in this sense, are part of the hidden machinery of daily life, working constantly yet silently in the background. In contemplating the basal ganglia, one sees that movement is not merely about muscles contracting, but about rhythm, pacing, and suppression of excess. It is about finding the balance between starting and stopping, between repeating and varying, between effort and ease. The basal ganglia embody this balance, shaping the flow of motion into something that feels both natural and controlled. They are the reason that a step falls evenly, that a sentence unfolds smoothly, and that a gesture carries grace rather than awkwardness. Without them, the music of motion would lose its beat, and the harmony of action would dissolve. As we move forward in exploring the brain's control of movement, the basal ganglia stand as essential companions to the motor cortex and cerebellum. Each plays its own part, yet none functions in isolation. The basal ganglia, with their deep rhythms and quiet influence, ensure that the symphony of movement is not only possible, but also fluid, coordinated, and alive with precision. To reflect on their role is to recognize the hidden order behind every step and every gesture, the silent rhythm that underlies the dance of human life. 6. The cerebellum. Balance and fine-tuning. At the back of the brain, tucked beneath the broad hemispheres of the cerebrum, lies a smaller structure whose importance is both subtle and profound. This is the cerebellum, sometimes called the little brain. Although it occupies less space than the massive folds of the cerebral cortex, it contains an astonishing density of neurons, more than half of all those in the brain. The cerebellum is not primarily concerned with initiating movement, as the motor cortex is, but instead with refining it. Its task is to ensure that motions are coordinated, balanced, and graceful, to smooth away errors and maintain stability. Without its quiet guidance, human movement would be clumsy, irregular, and prone to constant mistakes. With it, even the simplest action acquires a natural flow, as though guided by an invisible hand of balance. The cerebellum is uniquely positioned for this role because of the vast network of connections it maintains. It receives input from nearly every sensory system: vision, hearing, touch, and the inner ear's vestibular apparatus, which informs the brain about balance and spatial orientation. It also receives information from the spinal cord about the state of the muscles and joints, as well as from the motor cortex about intended movements. With all these signals arriving together, the cerebellum compares intention with reality, checking whether an action is unfolding as planned. If the eyes report a misstep, if the inner ear signals a loss of balance, or if a limb moves more slowly than expected, the cerebellum sends corrections back to the motor systems to restore harmony. This process of constant comparison is what gives the cerebellum its role as the great fine-tuner of motion. Consider the act of catching a ball. The motor cortex may command the arm to extend. The basal ganglia may set the rhythm of the movement. But it is the cerebellum that ensures the hand closes at precisely the right moment to intercept the ball. It does so by predicting the trajectory, adjusting posture, and correcting for errors in timing. These predictions are made almost instantaneously, faster than conscious awareness could manage. The result is that the body adapts on the fly, seamlessly altering course to achieve accuracy. Without the cerebellum's intervention, the hand would often close too early or too late, and the ball would slip past. The cerebellum is equally essential for maintaining balance and posture. When standing upright, countless small adjustments are needed to counteract the pull of gravity and the natural sway of the body. The cerebellum monitors these shifts, sending signals to muscles in the legs, trunk, and neck to restore stability before a fall occurs. When walking on uneven ground, it predicts how the body will respond to each step, compensating in advance to prevent stumbling. This predictive ability is so refined that it can adjust movements before errors are fully apparent, relying on learned patterns and sensory cues to guide action. In this way, the cerebellum acts almost like an internal gyroscope, constantly recalibrating to keep the body steady. Another vital function of the cerebellum lies in the realm of timing. Movements must not only be accurate in space, but also in time, unfolding in the proper sequence with the right rhythm. When speaking, the muscles of the tongue, lips, and vocal cords must coordinate in rapid succession, each contraction timed to the fraction of a second. The cerebellum ensures this rhythm, allowing speech to flow smoothly and evenly. When playing music, it keeps tempo, aligning finger movements with auditory feedback. Even when walking, it times the alternating steps so that they remain steady and efficient. In all these cases, the cerebellum serves as the keeper of temporal precision, aligning actions with the passage of time. The cerebellum's role in learning movement is also significant. When a new skill is attempted, such as riding a bicycle, the cerebellum helps the body adapt to errors and refine coordination. Each wobble, each misstep is detected and corrected, and over time the corrections become ingrained until balance is maintained effortlessly. This capacity for motor learning is one of the reasons why practice leads to improvement. The cerebellum stores adjustments, gradually building a memory of how to perform the action more effectively. Once established, this memory allows the skill to be recalled with little conscious effort. Thus, whether it is learning to write, to dance, or to balance on one foot, the cerebellum plays a central role in transforming clumsy beginnings into fluid mastery. When the cerebellum is damaged or impaired, its importance becomes immediately apparent. Movements lose their precision, becoming shaky or unsteady, a condition known as ataxia. People with cerebellar disorders may struggle to walk in a straight line, their steps wide and irregular. They may find it difficult to judge distances, causing them to overshoot or undershoot when reaching for an object. Speech can become slurred, as the timing of muscular contractions in the mouth and throat falters. Eye movements may also be affected, making it difficult to track moving objects smoothly. These symptoms reveal the cerebellum's role, not in generating movement itself, but in refining and coordinating it. Without its quiet supervision, the orchestra of motion plays out of tune, each instrument slightly out of time. The architecture of the cerebellum supports its remarkable abilities. Its surface is highly folded, creating a large area for processing within a compact volume. Beneath this surface lie layers of specialized neurons, including the distinctive Purkinje cells, which are among the largest neurons in the human brain. These cells integrate vast amounts of information, receiving inputs from thousands of other neurons before sending output signals that influence motor pathways. The density and complexity of these circuits allow the cerebellum to perform rapid calculations, comparing intended and actual movements in real time. This structure explains how it can operate so quickly, providing corrections before the conscious mind is even aware of a mistake. Interestingly, the cerebellum is not limited to physical movement. Evidence suggests it may also play a role in cognitive processes, such as language, attention, and even aspects of emotion. Just as it refines the rhythm and timing of physical actions, it may also refine the rhythm and timing of thought. Some researchers propose that the cerebellum acts as a general predictor, applying its skills in error correction and timing not only to muscles but also to mental processes. While this role is less understood, it highlights the cerebellum's broader contribution to the smooth flow of human experience. One way to appreciate the cerebellum's role is to imagine moving without it. Walking would become uncertain, like balancing on shifting ground. Speech would lose its rhythm, words tumbling out unevenly. Simple tasks like pouring water into a cup would result in spills, as the timing and trajectory of the hand faltered. Life without the cerebellum would not be devoid of movement, but it would be stripped of grace, the fine adjustments that make action feel natural and effortless. In this sense, the cerebellum is not the origin of motion, but its sculptor, shaping rough drafts into polished expressions. In reflecting on the cerebellum, one is reminded of the hidden layers of intelligence within the body. Movement does not simply flow from will to muscle in a straight line, but passes through multiple systems of refinement, each adding its own contribution. The cerebellum is the quiet craftsman of this process, working behind the scenes to ensure that every gesture is balanced, every step aligned, every word timed with care. Its presence is felt not through conscious awareness, but through the ease with which the body moves in daily life. To notice its absence is to realize how much it gives, silently and without recognition, to the art of living. As we continue exploring the brain's orchestration of movement, the cerebellum stands alongside the motor cortex and basal ganglia as one of the essential pillars of control. Each has its unique role. The motor cortex initiates, the basal ganglia select and regulate, and the cerebellum refines and perfects. Together, they create the harmony of human motion, a symphony of intention, rhythm, and precision. To understand the cerebellum is to understand the importance of fine-tuning in all things, the subtle corrections that turn effort into grace, the hidden adjustments that keep us balanced in both body and life. 7. Neurons and synapses. How movement signals begin. At the most fundamental level, movement begins not with muscles or bones, but with the tiny, intricate workings of neurons. These specialized cells form the living fabric of the nervous system, carrying messages that direct every contraction of muscle fibers, every flex of a joint, and every subtle adjustment that keeps the body upright. Without neurons, the brain's plans would never reach the muscles, and the body would remain silent and still. The journey from thought to motion, which seems so immediate and effortless, is in truth a cascade of signals traveling along delicate cellular pathways. At the heart of this process are the neurons themselves and the connections they form with one another, known as synapses. Together, They provide the language through which the nervous system speaks, a language of electrical pulses and chemical exchanges that orchestrates the entire symphony of movement. A neuron is a cell unlike any other in the body. Its shape is specialized for communication, with long branching extensions that allow it to send and receive information across vast distances. Each neuron typically has a central cell body, or soma, which contains the nucleus and other essential machinery of life. From the soma extend dendrites, branching structures that receive incoming signals from other neurons. Stretching outward in the opposite direction is the axon, a long, slender fiber that carries outgoing signals toward other cells. Some axons may be only a fraction of a millimeter in length, while others, in the spinal cord and peripheral nerves, may extend over a meter, carrying commands from the brain to the farthest muscles of the limbs. At the end of the axon are terminals, small branches that connect to the next cell across the synapse, completing the chain of communication. The signal that travels along a neuron is electrical in nature. When a neuron is activated, it generates a brief change in electrical potential across its membrane, known as an action potential. This event is triggered by the movement of ions-charged particles such as sodium and potassium passing through channels in the cell's surface. Once initiated, the action potential propagates rapidly down the axon, like a wave of energy spreading along a wire. Unlike a fading ripple, this signal does not diminish as it travels. It is regenerated at each step, allowing it to reach the axon terminals with full strength. This ensures that commands from the brain can travel long distances without losing clarity, whether they are directing the blink of an eyelid or the movement of a foot. For many axons, this process is made faster by the presence of myelin, a fatty sheath that insulates the axon like the coating of an electrical cable. Myelin allows action potentials to leap between gaps known as nodes of Ranvier, a process called saltatory conduction. This leapfrogging greatly increases the speed of transmission, enabling signals to travel at rates exceeding 100 meters per second. Without myelin, communication slows dramatically, as seen in diseases such as multiple sclerosis, where the loss of this insulation leads to weakness, poor coordination, and delays in movement. Thus, the integrity of myelin is essential for the rapid, precise signaling that underlies graceful motion. When the action potential reaches the end of the axon, the electrical signal is transformed into a chemical one. At the synapse, neurotransmitters are released from the axon terminals into the small gap separating one neuron from the next. These molecules diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind to receptors on the receiving cell, causing ion channels to open and generating a new electrical signal. In this way, the message continues, passing from neuron to neuron until it reaches its destination. The synapse is therefore the point of translation in the nervous system, where electricity becomes chemistry, and chemistry becomes electricity again. It is also the point of flexibility, where signals can be strengthened, weakened, or modulated, allowing for learning and adaptation. Different neurotransmitters play different roles in the control of movement. Acetylcholine, for example, is the key chemical that signals muscles to contract. When motor neurons release acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction, it binds to receptors on muscle fibers, triggering the processes that lead to contraction. Dopamine, by contrast, plays a regulatory role within the basal ganglia, influencing the initiation and smooth execution of movement. Loss of dopamine leads to the rigidity and slowness of Parkinson's disease, showing how critical these chemical messengers are. Other neurotransmitters, such as glutamate and gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, provide excitation and inhibition, balancing the activity of neurons so that signals are neither too strong nor too weak. The delicate interplay of these chemicals allows movement to be both forceful and controlled, rapid and precise. The sheer number of neurons and synapses involved in movement is staggering. The human brain contains an estimated 86 billion neurons, each forming thousands of synaptic connections, resulting in a network of almost incomprehensible complexity. Within this network, motor commands are not carried by a single straight line of neurons, but by vast populations working together. Patterns of activity emerge across many cells, representing the intention to move a hand or shift the eyes. These patterns are then transmitted downward through spinal circuits, where they are further refined before reaching the motor neurons that activate muscles. Movement is thus not the product of one signal, but of countless coordinated signals, converging and diverging across the neural landscape. One of the most remarkable features of synapses is their plasticity, their ability to change in strength over time. When a synapse is used repeatedly, it often becomes stronger, releasing more neurotransmitter or generating larger responses in the receiving cell. This phenomenon, known as long-term potentiation, allows the nervous system to learn from experience. In the context of movement, it means that practicing a skill reinforces the synapses involved, making the action easier and smoother with repetition. Conversely, unused synapses may weaken, a process known as long-term depression. In this way, the neural circuits of movement are constantly shaped by practice, adapting to the demands placed upon them. The microscopic processes of neurons and synapses may seem distant from the experience of daily life, yet they are the foundation of everything we do. Every step taken, every object grasped, every word spoken, is the culmination of millions of action potentials firing along axons, millions of neurotransmitter molecules crossing synapses, and millions of muscle fibers contracting in response. These events occur silently and invisibly, without conscious awareness, yet they form the very substance of our existence in the physical world. The smoothness of a gesture, the accuracy of a movement, the rhythm of a dance, all depend on the ceaseless work of neurons and their synaptic connections. If one reflects on this process in stillness, it becomes clear how remarkable it is that the brain and body are able to translate thought into motion so seamlessly. Neurons, with their fragile membranes and microscopic channels, are able to transmit signals with speed and reliability that rival any engineered system. Synapses, with their chemical exchanges, provide both precision and flexibility, ensuring that no two movements are exactly alike. Together, form the fundamental machinery of life's movements, turning intention into action, potential into reality. As we continue to explore the brain's control of motion, the role of neurons and synapses reminds us that even the most ordinary gesture is built upon countless invisible events. It is a reminder that beneath the surface of the simplest action lies a vast and intricate world, a network of cells speaking to one another in pulses of electricity and whispers of chemistry. To move at all is to be carried by this hidden conversation, a conversation that never stops, even as we rest, even as we drift toward sleep. In the silence of the body, neurons continue to fire, synapses continue to pass their messages, and the quiet symphony of life goes on. 8. Descending pathways, from brain to spinal cord. When the motor cortex sends out its command to move, the signal does not leap directly into the muscles. Instead, it must travel a long journey down through the brain, into the brainstem, and through the spinal cord, before it reaches the nerves that connect with muscle fibers. This journey is carried out along what are known as descending pathways, bundles of axons that function like highways carrying instructions from the brain to the body. These pathways are essential because they ensure that the brain's plans are faithfully delivered to the appropriate muscles in the right sequence and at the right time. Without them, the motor cortex would be like a conductor without an orchestra, giving commands that could never be heard. The most prominent of these pathways is the corticospinal tract, often referred to as the pyramidal tract, because of the pyramid-shaped structures it forms as it passes through the brainstem. This tract originates in the primary motor cortex, where neurons, known as pyramidal cells, extend long axons downward. These axons descend through the internal capsule, a compact bundle of fibers that funnels information through the deep structures of the brain before continuing into the brainstem. Along the way, they gather input from other motor regions, such as the premotor cortex and supplementary motor area, ensuring that movements are coordinated with plans and context. As the corticospinal tract enters the brainstem, it passes through the midbrain, pons, and medulla. At the level of the medulla, something remarkable occurs. Most of the fibers cross to the opposite side of the body in a process known as decussation. This crossing explains why the left hemisphere of the brain controls movements on the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls movements on the left. It is a fundamental principle of motor control, one that has been observed for centuries in cases of injury and stroke. When damage occurs in one hemisphere, paralysis or weakness appears on the opposite side, reflecting the precise crossing of these descending fibers. Once the corticospinal tract fibers have crossed, they continue downward into the spinal cord, where they run within the white matter until they reach the level of the body part they are meant to control. There, they branch off to synapse onto motor neurons in the gray matter of the spinal cord. These motor neurons then extend their own axons outward through peripheral nerves to reach the muscles. In this way, the chain is completed, from motor cortex to corticospinal tract to spinal motor neuron, and finally to muscle fiber. Each step must function properly, for a break at any point can disrupt the flow of movement. Not all descending pathways follow this exact course. While the corticospinal tract is the most direct, there are also several other tracts that carry specialized forms of motor control. The corticobulbar tract, for example, carries signals from the cortex to the cranial nerves in the brainstem, controlling movements of the face, head, and neck. This tract is essential for speaking, swallowing, and facial expressions, giving the cortex fine control over the muscles that shape communication and identity. Other tracts, such as the vestibulospinal, reticulospinal, and rubrospinal tracts, arise from regions lower in the brain and contribute to posture, balance, and automatic adjustments of movement. These tracts work alongside the corticospinal system, ensuring that voluntary actions are supported by stability and coordination. The vestibulospinal tract, for instance, originates in the vestibular nuclei of the brainstem, which receive information from the inner ear about balance and head position. Signals from this tract help maintain posture and equilibrium, adjusting muscle tone in the trunk and limbs to keep the body upright. The reticulospinal tract arises from the reticular formation, a network of neurons in the brainstem that influences a wide range of functions. Its motor outputs help regulate posture and locomotion, often providing the background adjustments that allow voluntary movements to proceed smoothly. The rubrospinal tract, though less prominent in humans than in other animals, arises from the red nucleus in the midbrain and contributes to movement of the upper limbs. Together, these descending pathways form a layered system of control, with some providing direct voluntary movement and others ensuring automatic stability. What is striking about this system is how many layers of refinement are built into it. The motor cortex initiates the plan, but as the signal travels downward, it passes through checkpoints and receives modulation from other regions. The basal ganglia influence which signals are allowed to proceed. The cerebellum compares intended movements with sensory feedback, and the brainstem tracts add stability and automatic adjustments. By the time the signal reaches the spinal cord, it has been shaped by multiple systems, each ensuring that the final output will be effective. This redundancy and layering explain why movement is generally so reliable, and why even when one pathway is damaged, others can sometimes compensate. The spinal cord itself is not a passive receiver of these signals. Within its gray matter lie networks known as central pattern generators, which can produce rhythmic movements such as walking even without direct input from the brain. These spinal circuits interact with descending commands, allowing the brain to set goals and rhythm, while the spinal cord manages much of the detailed execution. In this way, the brain and spinal cord share responsibility for movement, with descending pathways acting as the bridge between intention and execution. When these pathways are disrupted, the effects can be profound. Damage to the corticospinal tract often results in weakness or paralysis, loss of fine motor control, and spasticity, a condition in which muscles contract too strongly due to loss of inhibitory signals. Damage to brainstem tracts can impair balance, posture, or the ability to coordinate movements automatically. Injuries to the spinal cord can cut off entire sections of descending pathways, leading to paralysis below the level of the injury. Yet, even in such cases, the body sometimes shows remarkable adaptability, with rehabilitation and training allowing other pathways or spinal circuits to partially take over. The descending pathways are, in a sense, the highways of the nervous system, carrying the messages of intention from the brain to the body. They are the routes along which thought becomes motion, where abstract plans are translated into concrete actions. Their integrity is essential, for without them the muscles would be silent, cut off from the commands of the mind. Yet they are also more than simple cables. They are living, dynamic pathways, constantly shaped by use, by learning, and by adaptation. Their function reflects the unity of the nervous system, a chain that links the highest regions of the cortex with the smallest fibers of muscle. As one reflects on these pathways, it becomes clear that movement is not simply about issuing orders from above, but about maintaining a constant dialogue between levels of the nervous system. The brain speaks through descending tracts. The spinal cord interprets and refines the message, and the muscles carry it out. At the same time, feedback flows upward, informing the brain of the results and allowing for correction. The descending pathways are thus part of a continuous loop, not a one-way street, embodying the principle that control in the body is always interactive, always shared. In the quiet act of lifting an arm, the descending pathways have already carried a flurry of signals, crossing from one side of the brain to the other, passing through the brainstem, weaving through the spinal cord, and finally activating the motor neurons that reach the muscles. The journey is long and intricate, but it is completed in less than the blink of an eye. That such complexity can occur so quickly and so reliably is a testament to the extraordinary design of the nervous system. To move at all is to rely on these pathways, to depend on their silent service every moment of life. 9. Reflex arcs. Not every movement we make requires the brain's deliberate command. Some actions unfold so quickly that they bypass conscious thought altogether, emerging directly from the spinal cord in circuits known as reflex arcs. These movements are among the most ancient and protective functions of the nervous system, ensuring that the body can respond instantly to danger or imbalance. While voluntary actions involve careful planning, coordination, and feedback from multiple regions of the brain, reflexes demonstrate another side of movement: swift, automatic responses that occur before we are even aware of them. They remind us that movement is not always a matter of choice, but sometimes a matter of survival. A reflex arc begins with a sensory receptor, a specialized structure that detects a change in the environment. When you touch something hot, pain receptors in the skin are activated. When the knee is tapped with a doctor's hammer, stretch receptors in the muscle are triggered. These receptors generate electrical signals that travel along sensory neurons into the spinal cord. Instead of sending the signal all the way to the brain for processing, the spinal cord responds immediately by routing the message directly to motor neurons. The motor neurons then activate the appropriate muscles, producing a rapid withdrawal, a kick, or another protective action. Only afterward does the brain receive information about what has happened, allowing you to become consciously aware of the stimulus. This arrangement has a clear advantage. Speed. By bypassing the higher centers of the brain, reflex arcs shorten the pathway from stimulus to response, reducing the time it takes to act. In situations where delay could mean harm, such as touching something sharp or stepping on a burning coal, reflexes protect the body before conscious recognition occurs. The brain still becomes involved after the fact, interpreting the event and potentially modifying the reflex for future situations. But the immediate safety of the body is ensured by the spinal cord's ability to act on its own. The knee-jerk reflex, also known as the patellar reflex, provides a classic example. When the tendon just below the kneecap is tapped, stretch receptors in the quadriceps muscle detect the sudden change. These receptors send signals into the spinal cord, where they connect directly to motor neurons that cause the quadriceps to contract. The result is a quick kick of the lower leg. This reflex is not merely a medical curiosity. It serves a practical function in everyday life. By responding automatically to changes in muscle length, it helps maintain posture and prevents sudden collapse of the legs. When standing upright, the reflex continuously fine-tunes muscle tone, keeping the body steady without requiring conscious effort. Other reflexes protect different parts of the body. The withdrawal reflex pulls the hand away from a hot surface or the foot away from a sharp object. The blink reflex closes the eyes rapidly in response to sudden stimuli, shielding them from potential harm. The cough reflex clears the airway when irritants are detected, preserving the passage of air to the lungs. Each of these reflexes operates on the same basic principle: a direct connection between sensory input and motor output through the spinal cord or brainstem, designed for speed and protection. Although reflexes are automatic, they are not entirely inflexible. The brain can influence and modulate reflex activity, adjusting the sensitivity or strength of the response. For example, athletes often train to control reflexive reactions, refining them so that performance becomes more precise. In martial arts, a practitioner may learn to suppress the instinct to flinch, replacing it with a controlled response. Even in daily life, the brain subtly adjusts reflexes to suit context, preventing overreaction in situations where a full protective movement is unnecessary. This ability to modulate reflexes demonstrates the interplay between automatic and voluntary systems, showing that the nervous system is both efficient and adaptable. Within the spinal cord, the circuitry of reflexes is surprisingly elegant. In some cases, the sensory neuron connects directly to the motor neuron, forming a monosynaptic reflex, as in the knee-jerk response. In other cases, additional interneurons are involved, creating polysynaptic reflexes that allow for more complex patterns of response. The withdrawal reflex, for instance, not only pulls a limb away from danger but also activates opposing muscles in a coordinated fashion, ensuring that balance is preserved. These interneurons act as small processors within the spinal cord, adding flexibility to reflexive responses. Reflexes also play a role in locomotion. The rhythmic pattern of walking involves central pattern generators in the spinal cord, but reflexes contribute to adjusting steps when unexpected obstacles or changes in terrain are encountered. If a foot strikes a stone, reflexes help lift the leg higher to clear the obstacle, while shifting weight to the other limb to maintain balance. This blending of reflexive and voluntary control allows walking to be both automatic and adaptable, a process that feels effortless yet depends on constant neural communication. The importance of reflex arcs becomes especially apparent when they are disrupted. Damage to sensory neurons, motor neurons, or the spinal cord can diminish or abolish reflexes, leading to weakness, instability, and increased vulnerability to injury. Conversely, when higher brain centers are damaged, reflexes may become exaggerated, producing overly strong or uncontrolled responses. This is often seen in conditions such as stroke or spinal cord injury, where the loss of descending inhibition from the brain leaves spinal reflexes unchecked. These changes highlight the balance normally maintained between automatic reflexes and voluntary control, a balance that is crucial for smooth and adaptive movement. Reflexes also provide a window into the health of the nervous system. Neurologists often test reflexes during examinations, tapping tendons, shining lights into the eyes, or brushing the skin to observe the responses. The presence, absence, or exaggeration of these reflexes gives important clues about where in the nervous system an injury or disease may lie. In this way, reflexes serve as both protectors of the body and indicators of its condition, silently reflecting the integrity of the underlying neural circuits. Beyond their medical and protective roles, reflexes invite a more philosophical reflection. They remind us that not all of life's actions are under conscious control. Much of what keeps us alive and safe occurs beneath awareness, carried out by circuits that act with speed and certainty. In their simplicity, reflexes embody the nervous system's fundamental purpose: to ensure survival by connecting sensation to action in the most direct way possible. They are ancient, reliable, and endlessly active, forming a foundation upon which the more elaborate structures of voluntary movement are built. To contemplate reflex arcs is to glimpse the balance between instinct and intention, between the body's need for speed and the mind's desire for choice. They show us that movement is not only about freedom but also about necessity, that beneath our conscious control lies a bedrock of automatic responses. In the quiet withdrawal of a hand from danger, in the steady correction of posture, in the blink that shields the eyes from harm, the nervous system speaks in its oldest and most urgent voice. Reflexes may not capture our attention in daily life, yet without them, the world would be filled with greater danger, and the body would be far less prepared to meet it. 10. Muscle contraction, turning signals into motion. At the end of the long journey from the brain through the spinal cord and nerves lies the final step in the chain of movement, the contraction of muscle fibers. For all the complexity of planning, coordinating, and transmitting signals, it is the muscles themselves that ultimately carry out the motion, translating electrical impulses into physical force. This transformation, from neural signal to contraction, is one of the most elegant processes in the human body. It happens silently and invisibly, yet it is the basis of every gesture, every step, and every word spoken. Without the machinery of muscle contraction, the brain's most intricate commands would remain abstract, never expressed in the world of action. The point where nerve and muscle meet is called the neuromuscular junction, a specialized synapse that serves as the gateway between electrical communication in the nervous system and mechanical response in the muscular system. When a motor neuron reaches the end of its axon, it does not fuse directly with the muscle fiber. Instead, it forms a close connection across a small gap. When an action potential travels down the axon and arrives at this junction, it triggers the release of a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. This chemical diffuses across the gap and binds to receptors on the muscle fiber's surface, causing channels to open and allowing ions to flow into the muscle. In this way, the electrical signal from the nerve is converted into a new electrical signal within the muscle itself. Once this electrical impulse, known as an action potential, is generated in the muscle fiber, it spreads rapidly along the surface of the fiber and deep into its interior through structures called tubules. These tubes carry the signal to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, a specialized storage system within the muscle that contains calcium ions. In response to the signal, calcium is released into the interior of the muscle fiber, setting in motion the process of contraction. Calcium acts as the key that unlocks the molecular machinery of motion, allowing the proteins inside the muscle to slide past one another and generate force. The proteins responsible for contraction are actin and myosin, arranged in repeating units called sarcomeres. Myosin molecules have small projections known as heads which can attach to binding sites on actin filaments. When calcium is present, these binding sites become available, and the myosin heads latch on to the actin. Using energy from the molecule ATP, the myosin heads pivot, pulling the actin filaments closer together. This action is often described as a power stroke, and when repeated across millions of molecules within the fiber, it produces the shortening of the sarcomere. As sarcomeres shorten in unison, the entire muscle fiber contracts, and as fibers contract together, the muscle as a whole generates movement. This process is sometimes called the sliding filament mechanism, a term that captures the essence of how motion is created at the molecular level. The filaments of actin and myosin do not shorten themselves. Rather, they slide past each other, bringing the ends of the sarcomere closer together. When contraction ends, calcium is pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The binding sites on actin are covered once again, and the muscle relaxes. The cycle of contraction and relaxation can occur rapidly, allowing for fast movements like a flick of the finger, or it can be sustained, producing the steady tension required to hold a posture. The nervous system controls not only whether a muscle contracts but also how strongly it contracts. Each motor neuron controls a group of muscle fibers known as a motor unit. Some motor units are small, consisting of just a handful of fibers, providing fine control for delicate movements, such as those in the fingers or the muscles controlling the eyes. Others are large, consisting of hundreds of fibers, providing powerful contractions for movements of the legs or back. When greater force is required, more motor units are recruited, and when precision is needed, smaller units are activated selectively. This principle, known as motor unit recruitment, allows the body to balance strength with finesse, adjusting muscle activity to suit the demands of each task. Muscle contraction also depends on the availability of energy. The molecule ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, provides the fuel for the power strokes of myosin. The body produces ATP through multiple pathways: immediate supplies stored within the muscle, rapid generation through anaerobic processes, and slower but more sustainable production through aerobic metabolism. During intense activity, ATP can be consumed quickly, leading to fatigue as energy stores are depleted. Muscles adapt to different demands by developing endurance, strength, or speed, depending on the type of training and use they receive. This adaptability highlights the dynamic relationship between nervous system control and muscular function, each adjusting to the other's needs. The types of muscle fibers also play a role in how contraction supports movement. Slow twitch fibers are specialized for endurance, contracting more slowly, but sustaining activity for long periods without fatigue. They are rich in mitochondria and blood supply, making them efficient in aerobic metabolism. Fast twitch fibers, by contrast, contract quickly and with great force, but fatigue more rapidly. These fibers are suited for short bursts of power, such as sprinting or lifting heavy objects. The body contains a mixture of both, and the nervous system recruits them in different proportions, depending on the activity. This mixture allows humans to perform a wide range of movements, from the steady act of walking to the explosive effort of jumping. When muscle contraction is disrupted, the effects on movement are immediate and noticeable. Diseases that impair the neuromuscular junction, such as myasthenia gravis, interfere with the transmission of signals from nerve to muscle, leading to weakness and fatigue. Conditions that affect the motor neurons, such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, prevent signals from reaching the muscles at all. Even at a simpler level, the depletion of energy or the buildup of waste products during exercise can cause temporary weakness and cramping. These challenges underscore how essential the link between nerve and muscle is, and how vulnerable movement can be when any step in the process is interrupted. Muscle contraction is also remarkable in its versatility. The same basic mechanism of actin and myosin sliding applies to all movements, Yet the outcomes are endlessly varied. A whisper of contraction allows the eyelids to blink softly. A sustained contraction in the legs supports the body while standing upright. A powerful contraction of the arm muscles can lift heavy objects, while delicate contractions of the tongue shape the sounds of speech. From the smallest to the largest actions, from the most forceful to the most refined, all are made possible by the same molecular machinery, activated by the signals of the nervous system. In contemplating muscle contraction, one sees how the nervous system's language of electricity and chemistry is translated into the physical language of force and motion. It is here, at the junction between nerve and muscle, that thought becomes action in the most literal sense. The brain may plan, the spinal cord may transmit, but it is the contraction of fibers, the sliding of filaments, and the release of calcium that ultimately move the body through space. This transformation is constant, quiet, and profoundly reliable, enabling life's most ordinary gestures and its most extraordinary feats. Every step taken, every hand raised, every word spoken carries within it this unseen process. To move it all is to set in motion a cascade that begins with neurons and ends with filaments sliding past one another. It is a reminder that beneath the simplicity of action lies a world of intricacy, a microscopic choreography that plays out within each muscle fiber. Muscle contraction is not just the end of the chain of movement, but also its culmination, the point where intention is made visible in the living world. 11. Sensory feedback, the loop of movement control. Every movement the body makes is guided not only by commands flowing outward from the brain, but also by a constant stream of signals returning inward from the body. This returning stream is known as sensory feedback, and it forms the essential loop of movement control. Without feedback, actions would be blind and imprecise, like trying to play a piano without hearing the notes, or attempting to walk in the dark without a sense of where the ground lies. Sensory feedback closes the circuit, informing the brain about the success of its commands and allowing continuous adjustments. It is this dialogue between brain and body, between command and correction, that makes movement fluid, accurate, and adaptable. One of the most fundamental forms of sensory feedback is proprioception, the sense of the body's position in space. Proprioceptors are specialized sensory receptors located in muscles, tendons, and joints. They detect stretch, tension, and movement, constantly reporting on the angle of the joints, the length of muscles, and the force being exerted. Thanks to proprioception, a person can close their eyes and still touch their nose, or walk across a room without watching every step. This sense is sometimes described as the sixth sense, not in the mystical sense, but as an additional modality of perception, as real and necessary as sight and hearing. Without proprioception, movement becomes uncertain, as though the body has lost its map of itself. The muscle spindle is one of the key proprioceptors. Located within muscles, it detects changes in muscle length and sends signals through sensory neurons to the spinal cord and brain. When a muscle is stretched, the spindles fire more actively, providing information about the degree of stretch. This information helps regulate muscle tone and prevents overstretching, forming the basis of reflexes such as the knee-jerk response. The Golgi tendon organ, another proprioceptor, is located in tendons where muscle meets bone. It detects tension, ensuring that excessive force does not damage the muscle or tendon. Together, these sensors keep the nervous system informed about the state of the muscles, allowing contractions to be adjusted in real time. Beyond proprioception, the senses of touch, vision, and the vestibular system of the inner ear all contribute to movement control. The skin provides feedback about contact with objects, pressure against the body, and the texture of surfaces. Vision guides movement by showing where objects are, how fast they are moving, and how far they lie from reach. The vestibular system provides crucial information about balance, detecting head position and motion through tiny structures filled with fluid and sensitive hair cells. This system tells the brain when the head tilts, accelerates, or rotates, allowing the body to adjust posture and keep balance even with closed eyes. All of these inputs merge with proprioception to create a seamless sense of how the body is moving in relation to the world. Consider the act of walking. Each step requires the precise placement of the foot, the right amount of force, and the steady balance of the trunk. Proprioceptors in the legs report on joint position and muscle stretch, ensuring that the foot lands where intended. Vision confirms the path ahead and warns of obstacles. The vestibular system reports on head position, helping to maintain equilibrium as the body shifts from one leg to the other. Touch receptors in the soles of the feet signal the firmness and slope of the ground, allowing for quick adjustment when surfaces are uneven. This flood of sensory feedback ensures that walking remains steady and efficient, with corrections made constantly, often before the conscious mind is even aware of them. The loop of sensory feedback is not only about maintaining balance and posture, but also about refining precision. When reaching for an object, the brain sends out a command to move the arm, but the exact trajectory is corrected along the way, based on feedback. If the hand drifts slightly too far to one side, proprioceptors and visual input inform the brain, and adjustments are made instantly. If the object is heavier than expected, tension sensors in the tendons signal the increased load, prompting stronger contraction. The result is that the movement appears smooth and effortless, even though countless tiny corrections are taking place. The cerebellum plays a central role in processing sensory feedback. It constantly compares the intended movement, as signaled by the motor cortex, with the actual movement, as reported by proprioceptors, vision, and balance. If there is a mismatch, the cerebellum sends corrective signals, adjusting timing, force, and coordination. This constant comparison and correction explain why movements are generally accurate and why errors are quickly minimized. Without sensory feedback, or without the cerebellum to interpret it, movements would drift off course, becoming clumsy and poorly timed. The importance of sensory feedback is especially clear when it is absent. Individuals with rare conditions that impair proprioception often describe feeling as though their limbs are not their own. They may need to watch their movements constantly to control them, relying on vision in place of proprioception. When vision is removed, movement becomes nearly impossible to manage. Similarly, loss of vestibular function leads to severe imbalance, making walking difficult without external support. These examples highlight how deeply movement depends on the body's internal dialogue with itself, and how fragile coordination becomes when that dialogue is interrupted. Even in everyday life, sensory feedback shows its importance in subtle ways. Athletes refine their movements by paying attention to the feel of emotion, letting proprioceptive feedback guide adjustments. Musicians rely on the tactile sense of their instruments, feeling the resistance of strings or keys as part of their performance. Craftsmen and artists shape their work through a combination of vision and touch, constantly adjusting based on the feedback of materials. In each case, the loop between command and correction ensures that the final result matches intention. Feedback also contributes to learning. When practicing a new skill, the nervous system relies on sensory signals to correct mistakes and reinforce successful movements. A child learning to catch a ball misses at first, but with each attempt, the brain uses visual and proprioceptive feedback to refine the timing and trajectory of the hands. Over time, the errors decrease, and the movement becomes smoother. This process of trial, correction, and repetition is the foundation of motor learning, and it depends entirely on feedback. Without it, improvement would be impossible, and movements would remain unrefined. One of the most fascinating aspects of sensory feedback is its integration into reflexes and automatic adjustments. For instance, when standing on one leg, proprioceptors detect small sways of the body and trigger corrections in the ankle and hip muscles, often without conscious awareness. These micro-adjustments prevent falling, even when the body seems still. Similarly, when holding a fragile object, tension receptors prevent the grip from becoming too strong, automatically relaxing the hand to avoid crushing it. These automatic adjustments show that feedback not only informs the brain but can also generate immediate local responses in the spinal cord, keeping movement safe and effective. To reflect on sensory feedback is to see movement not as a simple command from brain to muscle, but as a conversation, a continuous dialogue in which each side listens and responds. The brain issues the plan, the body reports the outcome, and corrections are made in an unending loop. This cycle is so rapid and seamless that it gives the illusion of effortless motion, though in truth, it depends on constant streams of information. In the gentle sway of standing, in the precision of reaching, in the rhythm of walking, sensory feedback is always present, guiding, correcting, and perfecting. In the grand orchestration of movement, sensory feedback is the mirror that allows the brain to see the consequences of its actions. It is the loop that keeps motion aligned with intention, that turns raw commands into graceful execution. Without it, the symphony of movement would lose its harmony, drifting into imbalance and uncertainty. With it, the body moves confidently through the world, adapting to change, correcting errors, and finding stability, even in the most complex of actions. 12. Coordination of complex movements. Everyday life is filled with actions that appear simple but are, in truth, the product of astonishingly complex coordination. To tie a shoelace, to play a chord on a guitar, to sip from a cup without spilling a drop. These are tasks that draw upon multiple regions of the brain, countless sensory feedback loops, and the seamless cooperation of muscles working in harmony. Complex movements are not created by any single part of the nervous system, but by the interaction of many, each contributing its own layer of guidance. The result is motion that feels natural, smooth, and precise. Even though beneath the surface, it is the product of a vast and intricate symphony. At the center of this coordination lies the motor cortex, which provides the initial plan and direction. It sends out commands to the spinal cord and muscles, determining which parts of the body should move and when. But this plan is only the beginning. The basal ganglia shape the rhythm, ensuring that movements are neither too abrupt nor too hesitant. The cerebellum compares the plan with real-time sensory feedback, correcting timing and alignment so that actions remain accurate. The spinal cord executes the commands while simultaneously generating reflexes and rhythmic patterns that simplify the load on the brain. Each level adds its own refinement, creating a system where no single region acts alone, but all work together. Consider the act of writing a word with a pen. The motor cortex initiates the intention and sends signals to the hand and fingers. The basal ganglia help regulate the flow of strokes, ensuring that letters follow one another with smooth continuity. The cerebellum adjusts pressure and timing so that the pen does not press too hard or drift unevenly. Proprioceptive feedback informs the brain about the position of each finger, while vision confirms the shape of the letters on the page. Even posture and balance come into play, with the spinal cord and brainstem adjusting the trunk and arm so that the writing remains steady. The entire system works in harmony, and the outcome is an act so ordinary it is often overlooked, yet so complex that it relies on nearly every major system of motor control. Speech offers another example of complex coordination. Producing a single word requires the precise movement of the tongue, lips, vocal cords, and respiratory muscles, all timed to fractions of a second. The motor cortex directs the pattern, but the cerebellum fine-tunes the rhythm, and the basal ganglia regulate the flow of syllables. Sensory feedback from hearing allows adjustments in pitch and clarity, while proprioceptive signals from the mouth and throat ensure proper articulation. To speak fluently, the brain must coordinate dozens of muscles in perfect sequence, adjusting constantly based on feedback. That we speak with ease is a testament to the nervous system's capacity to manage complexity without burdening the conscious mind. Walking, too, illustrates how layered coordination is. Though often described as automatic, it is in fact a blend of reflexes, spinal circuits, and higher-level planning. The spinal cord contains central pattern generators that create the rhythmic alternation of steps, freeing the brain from controlling every detail. The cerebellum ensures that balance is maintained, adjusting for uneven ground or sudden shifts in posture. The motor cortex contributes when walking requires conscious direction, such as stepping over an obstacle or changing pace. Vision and proprioception provide constant updates, allowing the body to adapt to changing terrain. Walking is simple only because the nervous system handles its complexity with such efficiency. Coordination also depends on timing across multiple muscles, a principle known as synergy. Few movements involve just one muscle. Most require groups of muscles working together, some contracting, while others relax. For example, when lifting an object, the biceps contract to raise the arm, while the triceps relax, and the shoulder and trunk muscles stabilize posture. This interplay requires careful timing to avoid jerks or strain. The cerebellum plays a critical role in managing synergies, ensuring that each muscle contributes the right force at the right time. The result is a fluid motion where all parts of the body support one another. Learning new skills reveals the complexity of coordination even more clearly. A beginner at the piano may strike notes unevenly, their hands moving awkwardly as the brain struggles to manage multiple layers of control. With practice, however, sensory feedback shapes the circuits of movement. The basal ganglia gradually automate patterns, the cerebellum refines timing, and the motor cortex focuses less on basic mechanics and more on expression. Over time, the once clumsy motion becomes graceful, showing how the nervous system adapts to complexity by distributing control more efficiently. This adaptability is why humans can acquire such a wide variety of skills, from playing sports to creating art. Coordination of complex movements also involves anticipation. The brain does not simply react to feedback but predicts what will happen next, adjusting before errors occur. When catching a ball, the eyes track its path, and the brain calculates where and when it will arrive. The motor system prepares the hand in advance, adjusting trajectory and timing so that the catch occurs smoothly. This predictive ability depends heavily on the cerebellum, which builds models of motion from past experience. By anticipating rather than reacting, the nervous system achieves accuracy, even in fast, dynamic situations. Disorders of coordination demonstrate how intricate the system truly is. Damage to the cerebellum can cause ataxia, where movements become jerky and poorly timed, making simple actions like reaching for a cup difficult. Impairments in the basal ganglia, as in Parkinson's disease, disrupt the rhythm of motion, producing stiffness and hesitation. Damage to sensory pathways can remove the feedback needed for accuracy, leaving movements clumsy and misdirected. Each condition highlights a different layer of coordination, showing how essential each part of the system is to the whole. Yet despite its complexity, the coordination of movement usually feels effortless. This is perhaps the most remarkable quality of the nervous system, that it manages complexity without overwhelming awareness. To dance, to speak, to play, to simply walk across a room, all are feats of coordination, requiring billions of neurons and countless adjustments every second, yet they flow without conscious thought. The brain shields the mind from the burden of these details, presenting instead the experience of smooth, fluid action. What feels simple is, in truth, the most intricate of symphonies. In reflecting on the coordination of complex movements, one is reminded of the hidden intelligence of the body. It is not merely the brain issuing orders, but a dialogue of systems working together, each refining and supporting the others. The motor cortex sets the stage, the basal ganglia regulate rhythm, the cerebellum polishes timing, the spinal cord manages patterns, and the senses provide constant guidance. Together, they produce movement that is not only effective but graceful, carrying the body through the world with precision. To notice this is to glimpse the quiet mastery of the nervous system, a mastery that unfolds in every step, every gesture, every word. 13. Automatic versus conscious control. Movement in the human body does not always arise from deliberate thought. Some actions flow automatically, almost as though they have been woven into the fabric of the nervous system, while others require focused, conscious control. This balance between the automatic and the voluntary is one of the most fascinating aspects of motor function. It reveals how the brain organizes actions to conserve energy and attention, handling familiar routines effortlessly while reserving conscious awareness for tasks that are new, demanding, or uncertain. To move through life with ease, the nervous system must constantly shift between these two modes, allowing some gestures to unfold without thought and others to receive full attention. Automatic movements are those that, through repetition and practice, have become ingrained in neural circuits so that they require little or no conscious supervision. Walking across a familiar floor, typing on a well-practiced keyboard, or brushing the teeth in the morning all fall into this category. The motor cortex still plays a role, but the basal ganglia and cerebellum take on much of the work, drawing on established motor programs to execute the movement smoothly. These programs are like stored templates, allowing the body to perform complex sequences without rethinking them each time. Once a movement has been learned thoroughly, the nervous system automates it, freeing the conscious mind for other concerns. By contrast, conscious control comes into play when movements are unfamiliar, intricate, or require adaptation to new conditions. Learning to drive a car for the first time is an example. In the beginning, each action demands attention. Pressing the pedals, turning the wheel, watching the mirrors. The motor cortex is heavily engaged, planning each detail. Over time, however, as the circuits of practice strengthen, many of these actions become automatic. The driver no longer thinks about pressing the brake or adjusting the steering wheel. Instead, attention is freed to focus on the road and the surrounding environment. This transition from conscious to automatic is one of the nervous system's most efficient strategies, allowing complex tasks to be managed with less effort over time. Automatic movements are not rigid or inflexible. They adapt smoothly to context because sensory feedback continues to inform the nervous system. When walking, for instance, most steps are automatic, controlled by spinal pattern generators and refined by the cerebellum. Yet if the ground becomes uneven or an obstacle appears, conscious control may step in briefly to adjust. This blending of automatic and conscious systems ensures both efficiency and adaptability. It allows the body to carry out most of its tasks effortlessly while still maintaining the ability to change course when needed. The distinction between automatic and conscious control is also evident in speech. A fluent speaker of their native language does not consciously think about the movements of the tongue or lips. Words flow automatically from deeply ingrained motor patterns, but when learning a new language, every sound may require careful attention, each syllable shaped deliberately. Over time, as practice reinforces the circuits, speech in the new language becomes more automatic. The nervous system gradually shifts the burden from conscious planning to automated execution, allowing fluency to develop. Neuroscience reveals that different brain systems support these two modes. Conscious control relies heavily on the motor cortex and prefrontal areas, regions associated with planning and decision-making. Automatic control, by contrast, leans more on the basal ganglia, cerebellum, and spinal circuits. These deeper structures specialize in patterns, rhythms, and fine-tuning, making them ideal for handling repetitive or well-learned actions. The transition from conscious to automatic is marked by a shift in which regions are most active, a shift that can be observed in brain imaging studies as people learn new skills. The balance between automatic and conscious control also has implications for attention and fatigue. Because conscious control requires effort, tasks that rely on it can be mentally exhausting. Learning a new skill may leave a person tired, not only in the body but also in the mind, because so much attention is required. Once the task becomes automatic, however, the mental burden lessens. Walking, eating, or dressing no longer tax the mind, leaving energy available for thought, creativity, or problem solving. In this way, automaticity is not just a convenience but a necessity for living efficiently. At times, however, automatic control can fail or be inappropriate. Habits, once formed, may persist even when they are no longer beneficial. For instance, someone who has learned to walk with a limp after an injury may continue the limp even after healing, because the movement pattern has become ingrained. Conscious effort may be needed to retrain the system and replace the automatic pattern with a healthier one. Similarly, in stressful situations, automatic responses may dominate, leading to reactions that are quick, but not always thoughtful. This interplay between automatic reflexes and conscious judgment is part of what makes human behavior both adaptable and complex. Disorders of movement often reveal the fragile balance between these two modes. In Parkinson's disease, for example, automatic control of movement is impaired. Actions that should flow effortlessly, such as walking, become stiff and slow, requiring conscious effort for each step. Patients often describe the experience of having to think deliberately about movements that once occurred naturally. Conversely, in conditions that affect the motor cortex, automatic patterns may remain intact while conscious control is weakened. These contrasts underscore how movement depends on the seamless integration of both systems. One of the most striking examples of automatic versus conscious control can be found in activities like playing music or sports. An accomplished pianist does not consciously instruct each finger. The hands move automatically, guided by patterns stored through long practice. Yet at certain moments when performing a new piece, or when an unexpected change occurs, conscious control re-enters, guiding adjustments and decisions. Athletes experience something similar. The fluid motions of running, jumping, or swinging are largely automatic, but when strategy or precision is required, conscious thought briefly takes the reins. The most skilled performers are those who achieve harmony between these modes, allowing automatic patterns to carry the flow, while conscious awareness intervenes only when necessary. To reflect on the balance of automatic and conscious control is to recognize the nervous system's wisdom in conserving attention. It shows that the body is designed not to burden the mind with every detail, but to automate what is familiar and reserve effort for what is new. It also reveals that movement is not simply about muscles obeying the brain, but about the brain deciding how much to supervise and how much to delegate. The quiet hum of automatic patterns sustains daily life, while the focused light of conscious control ensures flexibility and learning. In the end, this balance shapes the rhythm of existence itself. Most of life unfolds through automatic actions, freeing the mind to wander, to imagine, and to create. Yet conscious control remains ever present, ready to step in when new challenges arise. Together, these systems form a partnership, ensuring that movement is at once efficient, adaptable, and endlessly expressive. The dance between automatic and conscious control is not merely a feature of motor function. It is a reflection of how the brain manages the complexity of living, finding harmony between habit and choice, between effort and ease. 14. The role of the spinal cord as a highway. The spinal cord lies at the center of the body's communication system. A long, slender column of nervous tissue protected within the bony vertebrae of the spine. It extends from the base of the brain down to the lower back, and though it is far smaller than the brain itself, its role in movement is indispensable. The spinal cord serves as a vast highway of information, carrying signals back and forth between the brain and the body. Every step, every gesture, every subtle adjustment of posture depends on the faithful transmission of messages through this structure. Without it, the brain would be isolated from the muscles, and the body would be left unable to act upon the mind's intentions. The spinal cord is organized with a remarkable degree of precision. Within its interior lies gray matter, shaped roughly like a butterfly, where neuronal cell bodies are clustered. Surrounding this gray matter is white matter, composed of bundles of myelinated axons that travel up and down the cord. The ascending tracts carry sensory information upward, reporting on touch, pain, temperature, balance, and proprioception. The descending tracts carry motor commands downward, delivering the brain's instructions to the muscles. These pathways are arranged in distinct columns, like carefully marked lanes on a highway, ensuring that signals do not interfere with one another. This organization allows for rapid and efficient communication, even across the considerable length of the spinal cord. One of the most vital roles of the spinal cord is transmitting commands from the brain to the muscles. Signals originating in the motor cortex travel through descending tracts, such as the corticospinal tract, eventually synapsing with motor neurons located in the gray matter of the spinal cord. These motor neurons then send their own axons out through the peripheral nerves, reaching muscle fibers and triggering contraction. In this way, the spinal cord is not merely a passive cable but an essential relay station, distributing the brain's commands to the appropriate targets throughout the body. Without this relay, movement would never occur, no matter how well the brain planned it. But the spinal cord is not only a messenger, it also serves as an independent processor of information, capable of generating responses without direct input from the brain. Reflexes provide the clearest example of this autonomy. When a hand touches something hot, the sensory neurons carry the signal into the spinal cord, where interneurons immediately activate motor neurons to pull the hand away. The entire loop is completed within the cord, bypassing the brain to achieve speed. This ability to act independently ensures that the body can protect itself from harm, even before conscious awareness catches up. The brain later learns what has happened, but the spinal cord has already acted. Beyond reflexes, the spinal cord also contributes to the rhythmic patterns of locomotion. Embedded within its circuits are central pattern generators, networks of neurons capable of producing alternating rhythms of muscle contraction, such as those required for walking or running. These generators can function without constant oversight from the brain, creating the basic rhythm of steps. The brain still provides overall direction, whether to walk, how fast, where to turn, but the detailed coordination of alternating left and right steps is handled largely within the spinal cord. This division of labor reduces the burden on the brain, allowing complex movements to unfold smoothly and efficiently. The spinal cord also integrates sensory feedback with motor commands, ensuring that movement remains accurate and adaptive. Proprioceptive signals from muscles and joints enter the cord and influence motor neurons directly, adjusting contractions as needed. For instance, if a muscle is stretched unexpectedly, reflex circuits within the spinal cord activate to contract it, preventing overstretching or injury. This rapid response does not require brain involvement and helps maintain posture and stability in real time. By blending sensory input with motor output locally, the spinal cord ensures that movement can adapt instantly to changes in the environment. The structure of the spinal cord reflects its dual role as both highway and processor. Each segment of the cord corresponds to a specific region of the body, with pairs of spinal nerves branching outward to serve the muscles and skin of that region. These nerves emerge in symmetrical pairs along the length of the spine, carrying both sensory input and motor output. This segmental organization allows the spinal cord to manage the body systematically, dividing its workload into regions. It also explains why injuries at different levels of the cord produce different effects. Damage high in the cord may affect the arms, legs, and trunk, while damage lower down may affect only the legs. The precise mapping of body regions onto spinal segments is one of the spinal cord's most striking features. When the spinal cord is injured, the consequences are profound, reflecting its central role in movement. A complete injury that severs the cord cuts off communication between the brain and everything below the site of damage, leading to paralysis and loss of sensation. Partial injuries may leave some functions intact, but the effects are still life-altering. Yet even in such cases, the spinal cord demonstrates resilience. Circuits below the injury may still produce reflexes or rhythmic patterns, even if the brain can no longer direct them. Rehabilitation efforts often aim to tap into these preserved functions, training the body to use what remains, and sometimes even promoting regrowth or rewiring of pathways. The spinal cord also plays a vital role in maintaining the body's basic functions. Certain reflexes within the cord regulate muscle tone, bladder control, and aspects of circulation. These automatic processes continue even without constant brain involvement, demonstrating the cord's autonomy in sustaining the body. This autonomy highlights the nervous system's layered design. Higher centers provide voluntary control, while lower centers maintain essential functions. The spinal cord stands at the boundary between these layers, linking them while also contributing its own intelligence. Despite its modest size compared to the brain, the spinal cord's importance cannot be overstated. It is the central highway along which the nervous system's traffic flows, the bridge that connects thought to action, and the foundation upon which voluntary and automatic movement both depend. It embodies both simplicity and sophistication. Simplicity in its straightforward role as a conduit of signals, sophistication in its ability to generate and refine movement independently. To reflect on the spinal cord is to recognize that movement is not the product of the brain alone, but of a partnership between brain and cord, each contributing in its own way. The brain provides intention, planning, and higher control, while the spinal cord provides speed, rhythm, and direct responses. Together, they form a system that is both flexible and reliable, capable of responding instantly to danger, while also executing complex, deliberate actions. Without the spinal cord, the brain's commands would remain trapped in thought. Without the brain, the spinal cord's responses would lack direction. It is in their union that true movement emerges. In the grand design of the nervous system, the spinal cord may be thought of as the central highway of life, carrying the endless flow of messages that make action possible. It is the unseen pathway behind every gesture, the silent channel that links the mind with the body. To notice it is to see how much depends on its quiet work, how every step, every reach, every breath involves signals traveling up and down its length. The spinal cord is the thread that binds brain and body together, weaving thought into motion, sensation into awareness, and the living organism into a unified whole. 15. Movement in sleep and dreams. When the body lies in rest, eyes closed and the outside world fading, it may seem that movement itself also comes to a halt. Yet, within the sleeping brain, the orchestration of movement continues in ways both subtle and fascinating. Sleep is not a complete stillness, but a shifting state where muscles, nerves, and circuits of the brain remain active in carefully balanced patterns. Some movements are suppressed to preserve rest, others continue quietly to sustain life, and still others appear only in dreams, where imagined motion feels vivid, even though the body remains still. The study of movement in sleep reveals how deeply the brain regulates action, ensuring that even in our most vulnerable hours, the body remains safe, while the mind explores other worlds. One of the most fundamental aspects of sleep-related movement is the alternation between muscle activity and paralysis across different stages of the sleep cycle. During light sleep, muscles remain somewhat active, adjusting posture and making small shifts that keep the body comfortable. During deeper stages of non-REM sleep, muscle tone decreases, though the body may still roll or reposition itself to maintain circulation and relieve pressure. But in REM sleep, the stage most associated with dreaming, the brain actively paralyzes most skeletal muscles, preventing large-scale movement. This phenomenon, called atonia, is crucial for safety. Without it, the vivid motor commands generated by dream activity might translate into real actions, causing the dreamer to act out scenarios that exist only in the mind. Despite this paralysis, not all movement is silenced in REM sleep. The eyes, for which the stage is named, dart rapidly beneath the lids, reflecting the vivid imagery of dreams. Small twitches may occur in the fingers or face, brief flashes of motor activity breaking through the general stillness. Breathing and heart muscles continue, of course, sustained by automatic systems beyond conscious control. These subtle exceptions highlight the careful balance the brain maintains, suppressing major movement while allowing vital functions and small traces of activity to remain. Dreams themselves often contain rich and complex movements. Within the theater of the mind, people run, speak, reach, and even fly, performing actions that may be ordinary or extraordinary. The motor cortex and other movement-related regions of the brain are active during these dreams, generating patterns similar to those seen in waking life. Yet because of the paralysis of REM sleep, these signals do not reach the muscles. The result is an inner experience of motion without an outer expression. This separation shows that movement can be simulated entirely within the brain, producing sensations of action, even when the body is still. It is a reminder that the nervous system does not merely control movement, it can also imagine it vividly enough to feel real. There are conditions in which this system falters, offering insight into its normal function. In REM sleep behavior disorder, the paralysis of REM sleep is incomplete or absent, and individuals may act out their dreams physically. Movements can range from mild gestures to dramatic actions, sometimes leading to injury. This condition reveals what is usually hidden, that the dreaming brain generates powerful motor commands, restrained only by the protective paralysis imposed during REM sleep. When that restraint is lost, the dream world spills into the waking body. Not all sleep-related movements are tied to dreaming. Some occur in non-REM stages as automatic adjustments of the body. These include shifting position, stretching, or small contractions, known as myoclonic jerks, sudden twitches that often occur as one drifts into sleep. Such movements are thought to arise from the nervous system, adjusting as the body transitions from wakefulness to rest. They are harmless but serve as a reminder that sleep is not an absence of activity but a state of dynamic regulation. The brain's regulation of movement in sleep also extends to vital functions. Breathing continues through the rhythmic activity of brainstem centers that operate independently of conscious thought. The diaphragm and intercostal muscles contract and relax in steady cycles, ensuring oxygen supply. Even here, sensory feedback remains important. Receptors in the lungs and blood vessels monitor oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, adjusting the rhythm of breathing as needed. In this way, essential movements persist seamlessly through sleep, guided by circuits that remain active even when consciousness is set aside. Sleepwalking offers another fascinating window into the brain's control of movement during rest. Unlike REM sleep behavior disorder, sleepwalking occurs during deep non-REM sleep, when the body is not paralyzed. In this state, complex motor programs may activate, allowing individuals to rise from bed, walk, and even perform routine tasks, all without full awareness. The movements are automatic, lacking the guidance of conscious control, which is why they often appear clumsy or confused. Sleepwalking shows that the brain can produce coordinated movement even without the higher layers of awareness that usually direct it. A striking demonstration of the autonomy of motor systems. In a gentler way, dreaming itself reflects the nervous system's capacity to rehearse movement. The activity of the motor cortex during dreams is not wasted effort, but may serve a role in strengthening neural circuits. Just as athletes use mental rehearsal in waking life to improve performance, the dreaming brain may simulate motion as a form of practice, reinforcing patterns of coordination. This idea, though still under study, suggests that dreams are not only stories of the mind but also exercises for the nervous system, maintaining flexibility and readiness even in sleep. The relationship between movement and sleep also illustrates how carefully the brain balances activity and rest. Muscles cannot remain in constant contraction, nor can the nervous system fire endlessly without pause. Sleep provides renewal, yet it does not silence movement entirely. Instead, it modulates it, allowing essential actions to continue while suppressing those that would be disruptive. The result is a state where the body rests safely, the mind explores freely, and the systems of movement remain active in subtler forms. To reflect on movement in sleep is to glimpse the quiet wisdom of the nervous system. Even when we surrender control and drift into unconsciousness, the body is not abandoned. The spinal cord, brainstem, cerebellum, and cortex remain engaged, each in its own way, ensuring balance between rest and activity. Movements may shrink to twitches, breathing cycles, or imagined gestures, but they never cease entirely. Sleep is thus not a withdrawal from movement, but a transformation of it, a state where action takes on quieter, more hidden forms. In the rhythm of sleep and dreams, we see the nervous system's dual nature, protective and imaginative, suppressing physical action while generating inner motion. The stillness of the sleeping body is therefore not true stillness, but a carefully regulated balance, a dance of activity and restraint. To understand this is to appreciate the depth of the brain's control, a control that extends even into the night, guiding movement not only in waking life, but also in the landscapes of dreams. 16. Disorders of movement. When the system falters. The harmony of movement depends on countless signals, traveling with precision through the nervous system. From the highest centers of the brain to the smallest fibers of muscle. When this system functions smoothly, motion feels effortless, a graceful unfolding of thought into action. Yet the delicacy of this orchestration also makes it vulnerable. Disruptions at any level, whether in the motor cortex, basal ganglia, cerebellum, spinal cord, or muscles themselves, can lead to disorders of movement. These conditions remind us of how finely balanced the system is, and how deeply our sense of freedom and independence depends upon it. One of the most well-known movement disorders is Parkinson's disease, which arises primarily from degeneration of dopamine-producing neurons in a region of the basal ganglia called the substantia nigra. Dopamine is essential for regulating the initiation and smooth execution of movements. Without it, the circuits of the basal ganglia falter, leaving the individual with slowness of motion, stiffness, and tremors. Actions that once flowed automatically, walking, buttoning a shirt, lifting a cup, become hesitant and labored. The disease also affects posture and balance, leading to instability. Despite its challenges, the persistence of rhythmic patterns such as walking shows that the spinal cord and other systems remain intact, revealing the specific contribution of dopamine to movement control. Huntington's disease provides a contrasting picture. Caused by a genetic mutation, it leads to progressive degeneration of neurons within the basal ganglia and cortex. Unlike the slowed movements of Parkinson's, Huntington's disease produces excessive, uncontrolled motions, known as chorea. These movements may appear as sudden jerks, twists, or fidgeting, often interfering with purposeful actions. Over time, coordination, speech, and balance also deteriorate. The disorder illustrates how the basal ganglia normally suppress unwanted movement, maintaining focus and precision. When this suppression is lost, motion becomes fragmented and excessive, showing the importance of inhibition in motor control. The cerebellum, too, plays a crucial role in smooth coordination, and when it is damaged, the resulting condition is known as ataxia. Individuals with cerebellar ataxia often experience unsteady gait, poor balance, and difficulty performing precise actions. Movements may become jerky or poorly timed, and tasks like reaching for an object or writing a word can require exaggerated effort. Speech may also be affected, with words slurred or uneven, reflecting the cerebellum's role in timing muscular contractions. Unlike weakness, which stems from a lack of force, ataxia reflects a lack of coordination, reminding us that strength alone is not enough for effective movement. Disorders of the spinal cord also reveal its central role. Injuries that sever or compress the cord can interrupt communication between brain and body, producing paralysis and loss of sensation below the level of injury. The extent of impairment depends on the location. Damage high in the cord may affect both arms and legs, while damage lower down may spare the arms but affect the legs. Despite this loss of voluntary control, reflexes below the injury may persist, sometimes even becoming exaggerated, because the spinal cord's local circuits remain intact. This separation of reflexive and voluntary movement highlights the layered structure of motor control, where different levels of the system contribute distinct roles. Multiple sclerosis is another condition that disrupts movement, though its cause lies in the immune system's attack on myelin, the insulating sheath around axons. Without myelin, nerve impulses slow or fail to conduct properly, leading to weakness, fatigue, tremors, and difficulty walking. Because multiple sclerosis affects multiple regions of the central nervous system, symptoms can vary widely. Yet the common thread is disruption of the rapid, efficient signaling needed for coordination. The disease underscores the importance of myelin in allowing signals to travel at speeds sufficient for real-time control of motion. Muscle disorders can also impair movement, even when the nervous system itself is intact. In muscular dystrophies, genetic mutations weaken muscle fibers over time, reducing their ability to contract effectively. In myasthenia gravis, the immune system interferes with acetylcholine receptors at the neuromuscular junction, preventing signals from the nerve from activating the muscle. The result is weakness that worsens with use, making tasks such as climbing stairs or lifting objects increasingly difficult. These conditions remind us that the pathway from brain to action does not end with the nerve but must also rely on the responsiveness of the muscle. Disorders affecting coordination can also arise from stroke, in which blood supply to part of the brain is suddenly interrupted. Depending on the region affected, a stroke can cause paralysis on one side of the body, loss of speech, or impairments in balance and coordination. Stroke demonstrates how dependent movement is on the precise integrity of brain regions and their connections. Yet it also reveals the brain's resilience, as rehabilitation can often restore function through neuroplasticity, the capacity of remaining neurons to adapt and reorganize. Tremors, tics, and dystonias are additional examples of motor disorders that disrupt the natural flow of motion. Tremors produce rhythmic oscillations of a limb, often worsened by activity. Tics, seen in conditions such as Tourette's syndrome, are sudden, repetitive movements or sounds that occur involuntarily. Dystonias involve abnormal, sustained contractions that twist or contort parts of the body. Though varied in form, each represents a disruption in the balance between excitation and inhibition within motor circuits. They remind us that movement is not only about initiating action but also about restraining it, keeping activity within the bounds of intention. What unites all of these disorders is the way they reveal the contributions of different parts of the nervous system. Parkinson's shows the role of dopamine in initiating motion. Huntington's the role of inhibition in suppressing unwanted action. Cerebellar ataxia, the role of timing and coordination. Spinal cord injury, the role of pathways in connecting brain and body. Multiple sclerosis, the role of myelin in speed. And muscle disorders, the role of the final effectors in carrying out commands. Each condition provides a window into the complexity of movement, showing how even small disruptions can produce profound effects. Despite their challenges, these disorders also reveal the resilience of the human body. Rehabilitation, practice, and adaptation often allow individuals to regain or compensate for lost functions. Other pathways may take over, reflexes may be retrained, and muscles may strengthen with use. The nervous system's capacity for plasticity ensures that even when movement falters, recovery is possible. These adaptations highlight the system's remarkable ability not only to function, but also to relearn, reshaping itself to meet new challenges. In reflecting on disorders of movement, one sees both the fragility and the strength of the nervous system. Movement, which so often feels effortless, is in fact the result of a delicate interplay between countless structures. When one piece falters, the effects can be profound. Yet even then, the system continues to adapt, striving to restore balance. Disorders remind us not only of the intricate design of motor control, but also of the profound gift it represents: the ability to move freely through the world. 17. Parkinson's disease in calm detail. Among the many conditions that affect human movement, Parkinson's disease holds a special place, both because of how well it illustrates the brain's role in motor control, and because of its gentle but relentless nature. It is a disorder that unfolds slowly over time, often beginning with subtle changes that may seem almost unremarkable. A faint tremor in a hand, a slight stiffness in a limb, or a growing slowness in daily actions. Yet beneath these outward signs lies a profound disruption in the brain's chemistry and circuitry, one that reveals the delicate balance required for smooth and effortless motion. To understand Parkinson's disease is to see, with clarity and compassion, how movement depends on the integrity of specific brain systems, and how the loss of even a single chemical messenger can reshape the entire orchestra of the body. At the heart of Parkinson's disease is a structure deep within the brain called the substantia nigra, part of the basal ganglia. The neurons here are specialized in producing dopamine, a neurotransmitter essential for regulating the initiation and execution of movement. In healthy brains, dopamine is released into pathways that connect the substantia nigra with other parts of the basal ganglia, especially the striatum. These pathways form circuits that help decide which movements should begin, which should be held back, and how strongly each should unfold. In Parkinson's disease, the dopamine-producing neurons gradually degenerate, leading to a depletion of dopamine in these pathways. Without adequate dopamine, the balance between excitation and inhibition within the basal ganglia is disrupted, and movement begins to falter. The symptoms that result from this loss reflect the specific functions of dopamine in motor control. One of the earliest and most recognizable is tremor, often beginning in a hand or finger when the limb is at rest. The tremor tends to be rhythmic, as if the body is attempting to move without intention. Another hallmark symptom is bradykinesia, or slowness of movement. Tasks that were once quick and fluid, buttoning clothes, writing a note, rising from a chair, become progressively slower and more effortful. Rigidity, or increased muscle tone, is also common, giving the limbs a stiffness that resists both voluntary motion and external movement. Together, these symptoms create a picture of motion that is not absent but restrained, as though every action must push against invisible resistance. Postural instability is another feature that emerges as the disease progresses. Balance becomes harder to maintain, and small disturbances may lead to unsteadiness or falls. Walking often takes on a characteristic pattern, with short, shuffling steps and a reduced swing of the arms. Facial expressions may grow less animated, a feature sometimes described as mask-like, reflecting both reduced motor output and slowness of movement in the muscles of the face. Speech, too, can be affected, becoming softer or more monotonous. Each of these changes reflects the role of dopamine not only in movement of the limbs, but also in the fine adjustments that give motion its rhythm, expression, and vitality. Although motor symptoms are the most visible, Parkinson's disease also affects non-motor functions. Dopamine plays a role in motivation, reward, and mood, and its loss can contribute to fatigue, apathy, or depression. Other brain systems, beyond dopamine, may also be affected, leading to sleep disturbances, changes in cognition, or difficulties with automatic functions, such as digestion. These broader effects remind us that movement is deeply connected with the overall state of the brain and body, and that the circuits involved in motor control also touch upon emotion and thought. The gradual progression of Parkinson's disease reflects the slow loss of dopamine-producing neurons. By the time symptoms become noticeable, a significant proportion of these neurons have already been lost, underscoring how resilient the brain can be in compensating for damage. For years, subtle adjustments within the basal ganglia and related circuits can mask the decline. Once symptoms appear, however, they tend to progress steadily, although the pace varies among individuals. This slow unfolding gives Parkinson's its character as a long journey, one that requires adaptation not only of the nervous system, but of the person as a whole. Treatment of Parkinson's disease focuses on restoring or compensating for the loss of dopamine. The most common approach is the use of levodopa, a precursor molecule that the brain can convert into dopamine. When taken as medication, levodopa helps replenish dopamine levels in the basal ganglia, improving movement and reducing symptoms such as rigidity and bradykinesia. Other medications may enhance dopamine's effects, mimic its action, or help regulate the balance of neurotransmitters in the brain. These treatments do not cure the disease or halt its progression, but they can provide significant relief and improve quality of life. In some cases, surgical approaches such as deep brain stimulation are used. This technique involves implanting electrodes into specific regions of the basal ganglia, where they deliver electrical impulses that help regulate abnormal activity. The effects can be striking, reducing tremors and improving motor function in individuals who no longer respond well to medication alone. Deep brain stimulation highlights the remarkable plasticity of the nervous system, showing that even when chemical signals are disrupted, electrical modulation can restore some degree of balance. Parkinson's disease also illustrates the importance of rehabilitation and lifestyle in managing movement. Physical therapy, exercise, and occupational therapy can help maintain strength, flexibility, and coordination. Rhythmic activities such as dancing or walking to music are often particularly helpful, perhaps because they engage alternative pathways for rhythm and movement. Speech therapy can assist with voice and communication. These approaches underscore that while dopamine depletion is central to the disease, the nervous system retains a capacity for adaptation, and the environment can provide cues that support movement. The study of Parkinson's disease has contributed greatly to our understanding of motor control more generally. It has shown how critical dopamine is in selecting and initiating actions, how the basal ganglia serve as a gatekeeper of motion, and how the loss of even one neurotransmitter can ripple through the entire motor system. It has also highlighted the interplay between automatic and conscious control. Actions that once flowed without thought, such as walking, must in Parkinson's be carried out with deliberate effort. This shift reveals how deeply the nervous system normally automates movement, and how much energy is required when that automation is lost. To contemplate Parkinson's disease is to recognize both the vulnerability and resilience of the human nervous system. The vulnerability lies in the dependence on specific neurons and chemicals, the loss of which can transform life in profound ways. The resilience lies in the ability of the brain and body to adapt, to find new ways of moving, and to draw upon external supports. It is a reminder that movement, which often feels so simple, is in fact the product of delicate balances that must be maintained continuously. In the end, Parkinson's disease teaches us about the fragility of grace in movement and about the hidden effort behind actions we take for granted. It shows us how much depends on the silent work of dopamine, flowing through circuits deep in the brain, guiding every gesture and step. Yet it also shows us the persistence of life, the capacity to adapt, and the quiet strength with which individuals continue to move forward despite the challenges. In this balance of loss and resilience lies a profound truth about the human experience. That movement, like life itself, is both delicate and enduring. 18. Other neurological conditions affecting movement. While Parkinson's disease provides one of the clearest illustrations of how the nervous system regulates motion, it is only one among many conditions that can disturb the harmony of movement. The brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves each play indispensable roles in carrying thought into action, and disruptions at any level can alter the way the body moves. Some of these conditions appear suddenly, while others progress gradually over years. Some weaken muscles, others disrupt coordination, and still others distort the smooth rhythm of motion. Each one reveals another layer of the nervous system's complexity and shows how deeply movement depends on the integrity of neural pathways. Stroke is one of the most common causes of sudden movement impairment. When blood supply to a region of the brain is interrupted, neurons are deprived of oxygen and nutrients, leading to injury or death. If the affected area includes motor regions, such as the motor cortex or its pathways, weakness or paralysis may appear on the opposite side of the body. The degree of impairment varies widely. Some individuals may lose the ability to move an arm or leg, while others may experience more subtle weakness or difficulty with coordination. Because strokes can also affect regions involved in speech, swallowing, or balance, their impact on movement often extends beyond simple strength. Yet the nervous system's plasticity allows many individuals to recover some function, as other areas of the brain adapt to take over lost roles. Rehabilitation after stroke emphasizes this adaptability, using repeated practice and sensory feedback to re-establish motor control. Multiple sclerosis offers another window into the nervous system's vulnerability. This condition arises when the immune system mistakenly attacks myelin, the protective sheath that insulates axons. Without myelin, electrical signals travel more slowly or fail to conduct altogether. Because multiple sclerosis can affect different regions of the central nervous system, its symptoms are diverse, but movement problems are among the most prominent. Tremors, weakness, spasticity, and imbalance often appear, sometimes fluctuating with periods of relapse and remission. The unpredictability of the disease adds to its challenge, as movement may vary from day to day. Multiple sclerosis illustrates the crucial role of myelin in maintaining the speed and reliability of motor signals, and the profound effects when this insulation is lost. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, represents a different kind of disruption. Instead of affecting myelin or neurotransmitters, it directly targets motor neurons themselves. Both the upper motor neurons in the brain and the lower motor neurons in the spinal cord gradually degenerate, cutting off communication with the muscles. As a result, muscles weaken and waste away, leading to difficulty with walking, speaking, swallowing, and eventually breathing. Unlike conditions that affect coordination or speed, ALS strikes at the very link between brain and muscle, severing the pathway of movement at its source. The disease progresses relentlessly, but it also highlights the stark dependence of movement on motor neurons. Without their signals, even the strongest muscles cannot act. Cerebral palsy is another condition that affects movement, though its origins lie in early development rather than degeneration. Caused by injury or abnormalities in the developing brain, cerebral palsy leads to a range of motor difficulties, including spasticity, weakness, and poor coordination. The severity varies widely. Some individuals walk independently, while others rely on wheelchairs or assistive devices. Unlike progressive diseases, cerebral palsy does not worsen over time, but its effects on movement are lifelong. Rehabilitation, therapy, and support can help individuals adapt and develop skills, demonstrating the brain's ability to work around early injuries. The condition underscores how movement depends not only on intact circuits, but also on their proper formation during development. Peripheral neuropathy reveals yet another level of vulnerability. In this condition, the peripheral nerves that carry signals between the spinal cord and the limbs are damaged, often by diabetes, toxins, or infections. The result is weakness, numbness, or loss of coordination, especially in the hands and feet. Because the sensory nerves are also often affected, the brain loses feedback about limb position and touch, making movement clumsy and uncertain. Simple tasks like walking or holding objects may require visual monitoring, as the natural proprioceptive guidance is lost. Peripheral neuropathy shows how essential the peripheral nerves are in linking the central nervous system with the body, and how their impairment disrupts both action and sensation. Movement can also be affected by disorders of the cerebellum beyond ataxia. Conditions such as spinocerebellar ataxias, a group of inherited disorders, progressively damage the cerebellum, leading to worsening imbalance, poor coordination, and slurred speech. Because the cerebellum is so central to timing and precision, its degeneration often leaves movements shaky, irregular, and poorly targeted. These disorders demonstrate how the cerebellum's subtle guidance is indispensable for smooth action, and how its loss transforms fluidity into clumsiness. Some conditions produce abnormal movements not by weakening muscles or disrupting coordination, but by causing involuntary contractions. Dystonias, for example, involve sustained or repetitive muscle contractions that twist or contort parts of the body. These movements can interfere with voluntary action, making tasks like writing or speaking difficult. Tics, seen in Tourette's syndrome, are sudden, repetitive movements or vocalizations that arise without conscious intention. Both dystonias and tics reflect disturbances in the balance of excitation and inhibition within motor circuits, particularly those involving the basal ganglia. They highlight how movement depends not only on initiating the right actions, but also on suppressing those that are unwanted. Even more subtle are the tremors that occur in conditions such as essential tremor, which produces rhythmic shaking, often of the hands or head. Unlike the tremor of Parkinson's disease, which occurs primarily at rest, essential tremor is most noticeable during action, such as holding a cup or writing. Though its exact cause is not fully understood, it likely involves abnormal communication between the cerebellum and other motor regions. For many individuals, the tremor is mild, but for others, it can interfere significantly with daily activities. Essential tremor reminds us that even slight disturbances in timing and coordination can have a visible impact on motion. What unites these diverse conditions is the way they reveal the nervous system's reliance on balance, timing, and connectivity. Stroke shows the importance of blood flow to brain tissue. Multiple sclerosis reveals the necessity of myelin for speed. ALS highlights the irreplaceable role of motor neurons. Cerebral palsy demonstrates the importance of proper development. Peripheral neuropathy shows the vulnerability of the pathways linking brain and body. Dystonias and tremors illustrate the need for precise regulation of excitation and inhibition. Each condition reflects a different aspect of the motor system, and each disrupts movement in its own way. Yet despite the challenges these disorders pose, they also reveal the resilience of the human body and mind. Rehabilitation, therapy, and adaptation allow many individuals to continue leading active lives. Assistive technologies, from braces to robotic devices, expand possibilities for motion. Advances in research continue to uncover new ways of protecting, repairing, or bypassing damaged circuits. The nervous system's plasticity, the ability to adapt and reorganize, remains a source of hope, showing that even when movement falters, recovery and adaptation are possible. To contemplate neurological conditions that affect movement is to see both the fragility and strength of the human design. Fragility, because small disruptions can so profoundly alter motion. Strength, because the body and brain continually seek ways to adapt, to relearn, and to move forward. Despite obstacles, movement is not guaranteed, yet it persists, reshaped by circumstance but never fully extinguished. In the steady determination of those who live with these conditions lies a reminder of the resilience that underlies all human motion. The quiet persistence of the nervous system to find a path, even when the way is uncertain. 19. The resilience and adaptability of the brain. Despite the many vulnerabilities of the nervous system, one of its most remarkable qualities is its resilience. The brain is not a rigid machine that fails completely when one part is damaged. It is a living, dynamic network with the capacity to adapt, reorganize, and even relearn. This adaptability, often referred to as neuroplasticity, allows the brain to recover after injury, to compensate for disease, and to refine movement through practice. It is the quiet strength that underlies human survival, enabling individuals to continue moving, speaking, and living, even in the face of disruption. To understand the resilience of the brain is to recognize how much of movement depends not only on precise circuits but also on the ability of those circuits to change. One of the clearest examples of neuroplasticity appears after stroke. When a blood clot or hemorrhage damages part of the motor cortex, the immediate result may be paralysis of an arm or leg. Yet with rehabilitation, many people regain some degree of function. How is this possible if the neurons in the affected region have died? The answer lies in the brain's capacity to recruit other areas to take over lost functions. Neighboring regions of the motor cortex may expand their influence, or areas in the opposite hemisphere may contribute. Pathways that were once secondary may become primary, allowing movement to re-emerge. Though recovery may not be complete, the improvement demonstrates how the brain can reorganize itself to preserve motion. This adaptability is not limited to recovery from injury. It is also the basis of learning and skill acquisition. When someone learns to play an instrument, practice gradually strengthens the connections between motor neurons, sensory neurons, and association areas. Movements that were once awkward become fluid, guided by reinforced pathways. Similarly, when athletes train, their brains refine the circuits for coordination, timing, and strength. These changes reflect structural modifications at the level of synapses, where connections become stronger or weaker depending on use. The same principles that allow recovery from damage also allow mastery of new skills, showing that resilience and learning are two sides of the same process. Neuroplasticity also explains why rehabilitation after injury often emphasizes repetition. Each time a person attempts a movement, even imperfectly, the brain reinforces the circuits involved. Over time, these circuits become stronger, and the movement becomes easier. Therapies that involve constraint, such as forcing use of a weakened limb, can be particularly effective because they encourage the brain to focus on building alternative pathways rather than relying on stronger ones. This deliberate shaping of plasticity is one of the most powerful tools in medicine, demonstrating that the brain is not fixed but can be trained to adapt. The cerebellum plays a vital role in this adaptability. Because it continuously compares intended movements with actual outcomes, it is ideally positioned to support learning. Errors are detected and corrected, and the corrections are stored, improving performance the next time. This process occurs in activities ranging from walking to speaking to playing sports. The cerebellum's contribution shows how the brain turns mistakes into opportunities for growth. Reshaping circuits based on experience. The very act of error, rather than being a sign of failure, is a signal that guides the brain toward refinement. Resilience also appears in the nervous system's ability to reroute signals. After spinal cord injury, for example, circuits below the injury may still be capable of producing reflexes or rhythmic patterns. With training, these circuits can sometimes be harnessed to generate partial movement, even if direct communication with the brain is impaired. Research has shown that electrical stimulation of the spinal cord can enhance this capacity, allowing individuals with paralysis to regain some voluntary control. These findings highlight the adaptability not only of the brain but also of the spinal cord, which retains its own intelligence and capacity for change. Another dimension of resilience lies in redundancy. The nervous system often has multiple pathways for achieving the same result. If one is damaged, others can sometimes compensate. For example, voluntary control of posture may rely on cortical pathways, but automatic adjustments can also arise from brainstem tracts. If one system fails, the other may provide partial support. This redundancy ensures that movement is not entirely lost when a single structure is impaired. It reflects the evolutionary importance of motor control. Survival depends so deeply on movement that the nervous system has developed layers of backup mechanisms. The adaptability of the brain also extends to sensory feedback. When one sense is lost, others can become heightened, providing alternative sources of guidance. A person who loses proprioception may rely more heavily on vision to control movement. Someone who loses vision may develop enhanced auditory and tactile sensitivity. These compensations do not replace the missing sense entirely, but they show how the brain reallocates attention and resources to preserve function. In movement, this means that even when one source of feedback is diminished, the body can still adapt to act with grace. Neuroplasticity also influences emotional and motivational aspects of movement. Depression, apathy, and fatigue can reduce activity, leading to further decline in motor function. Yet, positive reinforcement, encouragement, and rewarding practice can strengthen circuits and promote recovery. This connection between emotion and motion reflects the integrated nature of the nervous system. The resilience of the brain is not only mechanical but also psychological, shaped by belief, determination, and environment. The mind itself becomes a force in shaping movement, guiding the nervous system toward recovery or decline. Even in progressive conditions such as Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, resilience is evident. Though the underlying pathology continues, individuals often find ways to adapt. External cues, such as rhythmic music, can support walking. Assistive devices can compensate for weakness or imbalance. The brain learns to incorporate these aids into its circuits, treating them as extensions of the body. This adaptability allows people to maintain independence and dignity, even as challenges increase. It shows that resilience is not always about eliminating difficulty, but about finding new ways to move within it. The adaptability of the brain also raises questions about potential therapies in the future. Techniques such as brain-computer interfaces, neuroprosthetics, and regenerative medicine aim to harness or enhance plasticity. By directly linking the brain to external devices, signals that once traveled through damaged pathways can be rerouted. By encouraging growth of new neurons or connections, lost functions may be restored. Though these technologies are still developing, they reflect the same principle that underlies all resilience. The nervous system is capable of change, and with the right support, it can learn new ways to move. To reflect on the resilience and adaptability of the brain is to see movement not as fixed, but as fluid, shaped by experience, environment, and determination. It is a reminder that the nervous system is not merely a collection of circuits, but a living, evolving system that grows with us. Its strength lies not only in precision, but also in flexibility, the capacity to bend without breaking, to reorganize without surrendering. Movement, then, is not simply the execution of commands, but the outcome of a system always learning, always adapting, always seeking balance. In the quiet persistence of rehabilitation, in the gradual mastery of new skills, in the resilience of those who face illness yet continue to move forward, we see the true nature of the nervous system. It is not defined only by vulnerability, but by its extraordinary capacity to adapt. Every step relearned, every gesture regained, every moment of regained independence is a testament to this capacity. The brain, though delicate, is never static. It is always in motion, reshaping itself to meet the demands of life. 20. Closing reflections. The hidden effort of every gesture, to look at a person moving, walking across a room, reaching for a cup, turning their head to listen, is to witness something that seems simple, almost effortless. Yet beneath the surface, every gesture is the culmination of countless events, each unfolding in perfect sequence within the nervous system. It is easy to forget how much is required for even the smallest action, because the brain hides its labor from us. Movement feels natural and fluid, not because it is simple, but because the body has perfected the art of concealing complexity. In truth, every motion is a marvel of coordination, timing, and feedback, woven together by the invisible threads of neurons and synapses. The story of movement begins in the motor cortex, where intention is shaped into command. It passes through the basal ganglia, where rhythm and initiation are guided, and through the cerebellum, where timing and precision are refined. Signals descend along tracts of the spinal cord, branch out through peripheral nerves, and reach the muscles, where microscopic proteins slide past one another to create contraction. Along the way, sensory feedback flows upward, telling the brain what has happened, correcting errors, and ensuring balance. This loop of communication is constant, never pausing, even in sleep. The very act of lifting a finger depends on this vast network working in harmony. Reflexes add their own contributions, providing speed and protection. Without them, the body would hesitate in the face of danger, leaving us vulnerable to harm. Automatic movements, shaped by habit and learning, free the mind from the burden of constant oversight, allowing us to walk, type, or speak without deliberate effort. Conscious control, meanwhile, steps in when movements are new or uncertain, guiding practice until automation takes over. Each system has its role, and together they form a layered architecture where movement is at once deliberate and instinctive, free and regulated. When the system falters, as in conditions like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, or spinal cord injury, the effort behind movement becomes more visible. Actions that once flowed without thought suddenly demand concentration. Steps grow shorter, gestures slower, coordination less precise. These changes reveal what was always true but hidden: that smooth motion requires countless adjustments, time to the millisecond, and that the brain is constantly working to maintain this harmony. What feels effortless is, in fact, the product of immense and continuous effort. Yet even in the face of such challenges, the nervous system shows resilience. The brain adapts, recruiting new pathways, strengthening surviving circuits, and finding ways to work around damage. Muscles respond to training, growing stronger or more enduring as needed. Sensory systems shift, providing new forms of guidance when others are lost. Rehabilitation, practice, and persistence all draw upon this adaptability, reminding us that movement is not fixed but fluid, shaped by experience and effort. Even when disease or injury alters the system, the capacity to move often remains, transformed, but not extinguished. To reflect on movement is also to reflect on its role in human life. Motion is more than a mechanical necessity. It is expression, communication, and freedom. A wave of the hand can signal greeting, affection, or farewell. A dancer's steps can tell stories without words. The rhythm of walking can clear the mind, and the act of reaching can connect us to the world around us. Movement allows us to shape our environment, to build, to create, to explore. It is through movement that we extend the reach of thought into the physical world, turning imagination into action. Even in sleep, when consciousness drifts away, movement does not disappear entirely. The eyes flicker with dreams, the chest rises and falls with breath, and muscles twitch with hidden rehearsals of motion. In these quiet hours, the brain continues its orchestration, suppressing some actions, releasing others, and practicing patterns that may strengthen circuits for the waking day. This continuity reminds us that movement is not confined to waking life, but is woven into the fabric of being itself. There is also a quiet poetry in recognizing how much of movement occurs without awareness. Standing upright requires constant adjustments of muscles in the legs, back, and neck, yet we feel only stillness. Reaching for a glass requires calculations of distance, force, and timing, yet we experience only the smooth act of grasping. The nervous system shields us from the weight of this labor, offering instead the simplicity of action. It is a gift of hidden effort, one that frees the mind for thought, imagination, and connection. To appreciate the hidden effort of every gesture is to see the body in a new light. It is to recognize that grace is not natural but constructed, moment by moment, by circuits working tirelessly beneath awareness. It is to honor the countless neurons firing in silence, the synapses exchanging their chemical messages, the muscles contracting in perfect sequence. It is to see that what we call ordinary is, in fact, extraordinary, a miracle repeated endlessly as we move through life. The brain's control of movement is thus both a scientific truth and a quiet wonder. It is the foundation of survival, the medium of expression, and the source of independence. It is fragile, as diseases and injuries reveal, yet resilient, as adaptation and recovery demonstrate. Above all, it is continuous, a rhythm that never stops, from the first kicks of infancy to the final breaths of life. Every gesture, no matter how small, carries within it the hidden labor of the nervous system, the silent symphony of brain, cord, and muscle. In the stillness of reflection, one might pause to notice this symphony at work, the lift of the chest with each breath, the movement of the eyes as they scan a page, the gentle motion of fingers resting or tapping, all are part of the same grand design. They are reminders that life is motion, and motion is life, inseparable and constant. To move is to exist in the world, and to understand movement is to glimpse the depth of the systems that sustain us. In the end, the hidden effort of every gesture is not only a fact of biology, but also a lesson in humility. It teaches us that behind the simplest actions lies complexity we rarely acknowledge, and that the body gives us the gift of simplicity by shouldering that burden in silence. It teaches us that resilience is as much a part of movement as precision, and that adaptation is always possible, even when perfection is lost. Most of all, it teaches us to cherish the freedom of motion, not as something guaranteed, but as something earned, moment by moment, by the tireless work of the nervous system.